How did they know of them? Asked Ned, whom was frowning as he said it. It reminded Ashura of when they had first started to build them across the north, and Elia had suggested offering for them to be built across all of West Eos. The efforts in building the roads and then the Kalin Canal were hastened with the use of mammoths and giants. We have to work hard to build them, so why should they take advantage of the work we have done for the north? Ned had rhetorically asked. Merchants and travelers, no doubt. And then there is Lork and Swigert, whom undoubtedly gave their reports to their liege lords, and Robert Ashura reasoned. Whom asked for Valyrian roads? Asked Ned. Jon Arryn. Hoster Tully. Tywin Lannister. And Doran, said Ashura. Ned nodded as he thought about this. Aye, for the Arryns, Martells and Tullys. Aye, we can build them for Dorne, the Riverlands and the Vale, and let their completion serve as an example for the rest of West Eos to follow. But never for fucking Tywin Lannister, said Ned. Quite fucking right. I would never ever want for the North to have any business dealings with the fucking Lannisters. I'll send a raven to Doran to expect the road builders from the north and to prepare map roads in anticipation of their arrival. We'll build the roads for Dorne first, as they'll be the most difficult. I'll write to Jon Arryn and Hoster Tully for them to prepare the same for when they come, said Ned before Ashura pointed at where the letters were. Ned crumpled the letter from Casterly Rock and threw it into the fireplace. Chapter 13, A Taste of Battle. Chapter text. Algerdus v. Look at them. All that heavy and expensive armor can't be doing them that many favors, Bronn pointed out. Algerdus grinned as he looked at the small Braavosi army of 3,000 men. And on hills and mountains such as these, it would only be too easy to turn their numbers against them, said Algerdus. Will we attack then, uncle? Asked Tolaz. We will. But the men are all to take off heavy armor. It will weigh them down in an attack such as this, said Algerdus. Some of our men will be killed if we do, said Mark. Good. It will cull out the weak from the strong, remarked Bronn. Whilst Mark and Edric looked at Bronn in shock, Algerdus shook his head at his second. Come, let's get a move on, Algerdus said. They climbed down from their viewpoint and ran back to their camp. 2 days after reaching the Velvet Mountains before the Braavosis had arrived, they had spotted them march towards a gorge, the shortest route through the mountains without using the road. The shortest, but not the safest. Algerdus put his chainmail and leathers on and sheathed his bastard sword and his battle axe. This is it. This is the battle that will either make me or break me. Whatever happens after today, my life will never be the same as it was when I once was living comfortably back home in the Stormlands. Algerdus saw Bronn draw his sword and he walked alongside Algerdus as they were joined by his nephews. Are you all ready? Asked Algerdus. Yes, uncle, said Tolaz and Timon dutifully. Ready to kill and make some coin, said Tor Owen. Let's kill us some Braavosis, added Robin. I'm ready, uncle, said Edric. Here and now, said Mark as he drew his sword. Bronn just snorted at his nephews as they tried to look hard. Killing this lot will toughen them up, said Bronn. And if it doesn't? Asked Algerdus. Then, they are fucked, he replied. They led the army of 1,000 men to march silently through the rocky terrain and onto the top of the gorge. As they reached the top, Algerdus saw the Braavosis had halted their march and were beginning to rest. Don't they look tired, said Algerdus as he looked at them from his Mirish spyglass. All that marching would have wearied them out and made them thirsty, said Bronn. Well, look at all that water below them. That's a stream of the Little Rhoyne. We should push them down and let them have a swim, said Algerdus as he drew both his sword and his axe. Algerdus turned to Mark and clearly nodded to him. He nodded back and quietly started ordering for the archers to make ready. Fire as many volleys as you can before we get down to fight them. Stop firing once we reach that rock in the center there, said Algerdus as he pointed at a large rock sticking out on the banking as it went down onto the gorge's pathway. Now, uncle? Asked Mark. Now, Algerdus confirmed. Fire! Mark commanded. Algerdus stood up alongside Bronn and the archers began to fire a few volleys down onto the Braavosis. With me now! Algerdus shouted. Algerdus yelled as he charged down the banking and down towards the surprised and exhausted Braavosis. Many Braavosis were shot dead by the arrows before Algerdus reached the large rock. Algerdus saw 2 captains shouting orders to their men directly in front of him. He ran directly toward them and stabbed one and beheaded the other. He shoulder-tackled a soldier down and stabbed him before burying his axe into the skull of another. Hundreds of Bravosis had already been killed before they had even gotten down to fight them, Algirdas saw as he looked around for more enemies to fight. He saw Bron backstab one soldier, throw a dagger at another before slicing the throat of another as he came at him with a spear. He grabbed the spear and threw it at a horseman whom was trying to rally his men. The spear had hit the horse, and whilst the horse was killed, the horseman fell from the horse and over 200 feet down into the water. Algirdas cut through numerous Bravosi soldiers, stabbing and cutting with his axe and slicing and chopping with his axe. Just as he came running toward a group of archers, he saw Mark leading the rest of the army down the hill. "Good lad. Now we will break the bastards for good." Algirdas cut down an archer whom was aiming at one of his men. He beheaded another just as he had reached for an arrow from his quiver. Tolas joined him and sliced down the remaining 3 in quick succession. Now he is a very skilled fighter. Perhaps one day he will fulfill his dream of being a Kingsguard knight. Better he than scum like Meryn Trant or Boros Blount. They are Cersei's creatures in the Kingsguard, nothing at all like Drold Hightower, Arthur Dane, Barristan Selmy or Oswell Went. Algirdas dodged a spearman as he tried to impale him. He cut down his sword onto his spear, chopping it in half. He swung his axe around, beheading him before he could reach for his sheathed short sword. Algirdas looked around after killing him. The Bravosis were defeated. Only a few were still alive and fighting, whilst a few less than 200 had fled back the way they came, throwing down their weapons and armor as they ran. "I would keep your weapons on you as you run. You may run into bandits or Dothraki on your way home," Algirdas thought with amusement. Algirdas grinned as Storm Company cheered. "We've done it. We've fucking won." Edric cheered as he lifted high his sword and shield and cheered. "Fucking cowards. Come back and fight me, you fucking shits." Tor Owen yelled as he raised his large hammer. "Storm Company's first victory. And it will not be our last. Bellinora too. It's beautiful, you can't deny," Gelaro admitted, looking at Dragonspire from where they stood. "But a cruel tyrant sleeps on silk beds inside there, one who will destroy our people. And for what? To create a new Valyria." Bellinora stood with her closest friends, Gelaro, Salanus Carder and R'hllor Zarku, looking at the now completed Dragonspire. "What next? Will he want us to speak Valyrian and for us to never speak our language ever again?" asked R'hllor, Bellinora's best friend from childhood, and then they went to the Temple of Love together. "I'd sooner not speak at all than speak a language not my own that's forced onto us. Wouldn't surprise me." "Has your father said anything of what he is doing?" asked Salanos, knowing that R'hllor's father, Jalal, was the most outspoken Summer Isles nobleman against Aegon Rugaria and his conquest and rule over the Summer Isles. "He has sent letters across the sea to Westeros, to that long-exiled fool, Jalabaxho, for help," replied R'hllor. "Jalabaxho? The man has been bitter for years being exiled from the Red Flower Valley. Why should he want to help us? He'd probably come back to readily serve Rugaria," said Gelaro. "And he's been in Westeros for so long, he's probably more Westerosi than he is of the Summer Isles," Bellinora pointed out. "His own fault for being so weak as to be exiled in the first place. So what is to be done?" "We start a rebellion?" asked Salanos. "No, not yet," said Bellinora. "But, Bella, the people are crying for war and for these Valyrian, Lysan and sellsword scum to leave our homes and for us to be free once again. It's not as if the Westerosi will come to our aid in the future," said R'hllor. "I want to be free of them too. But we cannot begin a rebellion now," said Bellinora. "All men and women of the Isles are hardened by the battles fought here," Gelaro added. "Battles? Those are little more than games of people hitting at each other with wooden spears and shields, and the defeated only face exile. This is actual war of which we speak, where our enemies have steel and kill," Bellinora pointed out. War on the Summer Isles was ritualized by the priests, and only they could choose the time and days when these battles and wars took place. Such conflicts were often between two houses quarreling over land. The battles would often be less than a day, resembling the Militones that take place in Westeros as opposed to the fighting pits in Slavers Bay. The victors would gain what they wanted out of the conflict, whilst the defeated would be exiled. Most exiled had fled to the free cities or to Westeros, where many would be sellswords or sell sails. "So what can be done?" Because sooner or later, a war will start, said Salanus. The time isn't right, cousin. You know that better than I. We are not ready for war. And we need allies if we are to defeat Rugaria and crush him for good, said Bellanora. She's right, you know. Bellanora and her friends turned around to see Bellanora's older brother Xharo. A tall and muscular man. Looking at him now, Bellanora noticed he was far more scarred than she remembered of him. There was a large scar across his arm from his wrist to his elbow, as though done by a spear. And on his face, there was a scar from his eyebrow to the top of his forehead, just touching his dark curling hair. She had last seen him 2 years ago, when he had returned briefly from fighting Dothraki near Tioche. Brother! What are you doing back here? Bellanora asked as she hugged her brother. I came as soon as I had heard the news, said Xharo. Are you still with the Second Sons? Asked Salanos as he shook hands with his cousin. I am not. Our new commander, Mero, is a lazy fool and would probably serve Rugaria given the chance, said Xharo. So, what do you say? Can we defeat Rugaria if we were to rise in rebellion? Eagerly asked Gelaro. No, said Xharo as he shook his head and scratched an itch in his short beard. I saw for myself the situation of Rugaria's strength and his forces when we arrived, said Xharo. We, asked Rala. Myself and 20 others of the Summer Isles come to save our homeland, explained Xharo before he continued. Rugaria is clever. He has a strong navy of 50 warships. They are not fast or wieldy like our own swan ships, true. But they are strong and are warships that can ram and fire ballista at our ships. And he has an army of experienced soldiers, all armed with steel swords, spears, axes and arrows. We have no such thing here, said Xharo. If there is to be war soon, then we must first be organized. No war such as the one you are all dreaming of was planned yesterday and fought tomorrow. We must gather plans, spy on the enemy, see what supplies and equipment they have and maintain the army to fight them and throw them out. And like my sister said, we cannot fight this war on our own. We need help. Daenerys too. Daenerys was sewing the first of 2 dresses for her wedding to Harald Arryn. The first was for when she first arrived in the Vale and was received by his parents Jon and Lysa Arryn and the lords and ladies of the Vale. And the second was the wedding dress. She was being helped by Lyanna, Rhaenys, Serena, Jane and Beth. What sort of images should we have on the dress for when she arrives in the Eyrie? Serena asked. Dragons and wolves. Beth suggested. No, why not dragons and falcons? If she is to wed the future lord of the Eyrie, added Jane. No. Elia said that Rhaenys, Aegon and I are the last dragons of Westeros. Viserys may be a Targaryen, but he has been in Pentos for so long that he will never gain an army and take back King's Landing, in spite of all of his claims that he is the rightful heir and not Aegon. For as long as Daenerys could remember, she would receive ravens from across the narrow sea from her brother Viserys. But whilst he sent letters to her, neither their niece and nephew Rhaenys and Aegon ever received letters. As she grew older, Daenerys understood more about Viserys from his letters, which promised her that he would free you from the savages whom imprison you in the north, and that when the time came for him to take my rightful place on the Iron Throne, we will be wed and you will be my queen. He would also tell her to write to him which noble families would support him the moment he landed in Westeros with an army. And every letter she received, she would show them to Elia, Ashera and Eddard. Both Elia and Aunt Ashera told her that her father planned for Viserys and Daenerys to wed whilst mother was carrying her. They also told her how he obsessively told Viserys about the importance of House Targaryen having pure Valyrian bloodlines. This was why he had never once sent letters to Rhaenys and Aegon, whom he had often referred to as Dornish half-breeds. Dragons, just dragons on my dress, said Daenerys. Are you sure, Dany? Some lords of the Vale may think that you want to overthrow Robert Baratheon. Lyanna asked with worry. Robert Baratheon was never referred to as the king amongst them, after how he had attempted to murder Daenerys, Rhaenys and Aegon when they were all still children, for no reason other than whom their fathers were and being Targaryens. I am a Targaryen and I won't be frightened into submission by stags or lions. If I cannot be brave at my own wedding to show the world who I am, then how will I be able to do that for the rest of my life? Daenerys asked. You'd be taking a great risk, Dany. There are some in the Vale whom hate House Targaryen because of your father, said Serena with worry. I know, Serena. But, I won't show them, I am afraid. I am a dragon. I'm not a mad and murdering coward like my father. And I'm certainly not a stupid idiot like either of my brothers. I will be like mother, and be brave in the face all hardships, Daenerys thought as she remembered all of the stories Elia and Aunt Ashura had told her about Queen R'hllor. And then she thought about what Serena said, about how there were Vale Lords whom hated House Targaryen for the losses of family during the rebellion. The only ones she had met in person were Bronze Yohn Royce and his 3 sons, Ander, Robar and Waymar, and daughter, Zilla, when they had visited Winterfell, for Bronze Yohn was an old and dear friend of Uncle Eddard. And Elia told Daenerys how when Uncle Eddard defended them in the throne room that day, whilst northern lords stood by him, none confronted the king as he had done. Except for the Lord of Runestone. But whilst he had helped Eddard defend them when they were children, when he had first come to Winterfell, when he had first seen Daenerys, Rhaenys and Aegon, he was unsure of them, until he knew them better and saw that they were indeed unlike their fathers. Daenerys was pleased with the finished first dress when she wore it for them to see. It was a mix of white and blue on the front and a greying color on the back. And held together by a silver cloak fastener, she wore a black cloak with a ruby-red 3-headed dragon emblazoned on it. Daenerys loved it as she looked at herself in the mirror. "What do you think?" Daenerys asked her niece and friends. "It's beautiful. It looks truly beautiful," Lyanna said with a beaming smile. It looks amazing. "You look like a true Targaryen princess," Jane said with an admiring smile. Yes, I'm a Targaryen princess. I am of the North and of House Targaryen. And none in the North, the Vale or the South will ever see weakness in me." Because it had taken a long time, Daenerys had decided on the wedding dress. "We'll get started on it tomorrow. We deserve a rest and soon it will be dinner," said Daenerys. "Are you sure, Dany?" "We could get a good start on it now," Beth offered. "We have only just finished her dress for when she is met by the Arryns, Beth," Rhaenys pointed out. As they left Daenerys' chambers, Daenerys asked Rhaenys to stay behind. Can you stay for a moment?" "Of course, Aunt," she replied. Rhaenys sat next to Daenerys on Daenerys' bed. "Gods, how do I ask this? What is it like?" "What's what like?" "Marrying." "No. Being with the man you love." Rhaenys lay down on the bed and sighed as she looked up at the ceiling. Daenerys lay down next to her. "It's wonderful. Especially now, when we no longer have to hide what we feel for each other. When I first started to feel for him and we started to fuck, everything just always felt so perfect and so right." She started to beam and her eyes glistened like diamonds as she spoke about Artos. "Even just talking about it makes me happy. Whenever we talk, even now, or when he just puts his arms around me, I always just feel so happy and so safe. If I had ever had a bad day, he would always be there to make me feel like the world is not such a terrible place and to remind me that he would always love me. That's a lot." Rhaenys sat up and looked at Daenerys. "Aunt Dany, what I'm saying is that love isn't what the storybooks or tales talk of. It's being with someone who doesn't love you only for your beauty or what you're like in bed. It's being with someone who cares for you, listens to what you have to say, values your opinion and understands you. It's about being with someone who loves you for who you are and not whom the other wants you to be." Daenerys thought about this before sitting up to face Rhaenys. "How did you know when you felt for Artos?" "When he returned from his trip around the north and his brief time as a ward of Last Hearth. I had always known that he had felt for me, but when I saw him return, I just felt as though I couldn't breathe around him. And when I wasn't around him, I wanted to be and would daydream about wedding him. I then decided to be adventurous and when we were dancing at Uncle Ned's name-a-day feast, I sneakily put a piece of parchment in his doublet pocket telling him to come to the first keep. As well as the parchment, I also added a pair of my perfumed underclothes," Rhaenys said with a grin. Daenerys couldn't help but giggle at her audacity. Gods, in spite of being a Targaryen, she clearly does have Dornish blood in her. And she is too much like her cousin Arianne. Daenerys then realized something about that night. "Was that why you were walking slowly the next morning?" Daenerys asked. Rhaenys giggled and said, Gods, that was one of the best nights of my life, even if it did hurt to walk later." She paused and then looked seriously at Daenerys. I discovered that I truly love him when I had told Ariane on my name a day feast about him. And she asked if I would share him with her for her stay. We have shared men and women in the past, but when she asked me of Artos, I immediately said no. Because I know that I'll never have another man or woman in my bed. Only Artos. Daenerys looked at the dress they had finished making that night. Will I be able to have that with Harold Arryn? From what I saw of him when he visited Winterfell for the wedding, he is certainly a handsome lad. But even if there isn't love, as long as he is good to you and never brings scandal to the Eyrie that would dishonor you, then that is enough. But when you are wed and you go to the Eyrie, see for yourself what sort of man he is. Learn what you can about him, tell him about yourself and build up your marriage, brick by brick. Chapter 14, An Uncertain Future. Chapter Text. Algerdus 6. Returning to Pentos, the people all rejoiced. Even though the war was ongoing, this was the first great victory which Pentos had achieved ever since the wars with Braavos had begun, centuries ago. And Algerdus was certain that it wouldn't be the last victory, achieved thanks to the efforts of Storm Company. It's nice that they show us gratitude. If there's one thing I hate, it's fucking ingrates, said Tymond as he looked around. You'll get plenty of them when you see more of the nobility of Westeros, of the free cities and all around the world, Ty Algerdus said. But when Storm Company fights for these nobles, then surely they should show a bit of gratitude, uncle, asked Tolaz. You would think that, but having said that, would you prefer that those nobles pay you good coin or to profusely thanked for your bravery in defeating said enemies, asked Algerdus, whilst looking at all of his nephews as he rode with them, Bronn and Arodus toward the prince's palace. They all agreed that it was better to be paid than to be thanked, which Bronn guffawed at. Once the prince pays us good for smashing those Braavoses, then you boys can decide whether it's better to be paid than to be thanked. Coin is coin, no matter who you work for, and once you make your fortune, then you can demand gratitude from the ingrates you used to work for, said Bronn. Algerdus expected to have a small reception at the prince's palace and for him to pay them what they had earned. But he was expecting, nay, hoping that the prince would pay more for the company to fight for Pentos again against the full might of the Braavosi army for when it entered onto Pentoshi lands. And at the courtyard of the prince's palace, Algerdus saw the prince surrounded by his wife, his numerous children and numerous Pentoshi nobles and generals observing their arrival. Algerdus was the first to dismount from his horse and he bowed to the prince, and was followed by Arodus, Bronn and Algerdus' nephews. Lord Algerdus, all of Pentos owes you thanks for your timely victory against the army that would dare to cross into Pentos and whom would have sought to raid and murder our people, said the prince to the benefit of those around him, who clapped at his speech. And in gratitude, you are to be paid your rightful due, he said before clapping his hands. Algerdus turned around to see a few dozen slaves bringing large chests to the center of the courtyard. Each chest was opened and Algerdus smiled at seeing the Pentoshi sunshine reflected off of the silver and gold coins. Just what the company needs to bring more men into our ranks and to make a greater reputation for ourselves. But, I would offer you more coin, Lord Algerdus, said the prince as he and Algerdus met face to face. I knew it. What would you have of me, my prince, asked Algerdus. Your victory has become a great inspiration for my people, who have only known defeat to Braavos. But this victory has given much needed morale to all of Pentos. If Storm Company was to fight alongside my army and to defeat the Braavosi army as it crosses into Pentos, I will reward Storm Company with 250,000 gelesses. 250,000. That's got to be at least 100,000 gold dragons. Even more coin, as well as what we've just been paid, will make us stronger and more desirable by all the rulers of Essos, Algerdus thought as he glanced from the prince, then to the chests of coin and then back to the prince of Pentos. I accept, my prince, said Algerdus. Aegon 4. I can do this, Aegon thought as he paced up and down his chamber floors, thinking about what he wanted to ask. No. What he needed to ask. I may not be king or crown prince or any prince of House Targaryen, but I have no intention to die a faceless warrior, forgotten by history, he thought as he drank from a cup of water at his bedside table. He took a deep breath as he put the cup down and then turned to the door. He walked to the door and closed it behind him as he headed for Uncle Ned Solar. He stared at the door, listening out for any sign of Uncle Eddard or Aunt Ashura inside. He could hear them talking. What has Lord Marndaeli said? Asked Aunt Ashura. He says that he is delighted by the idea and he will be glad to welcome Rookon to White Harbour and he would be glad to have him squire for Sir Willis, said Uncle Eddard. Continuing planning Rookon's future as Lord of Wolfsden and future husband of Lord Marndalis' granddaughter Wyler, Egon thought as he remembered meeting both Winifred and Wyler Marndaly at a feast in White Harbour. Winifred was beautiful and a very skilled dancer and very softly spoken, reminding him of Eliana. Whereas Wyler was loud-mouthed, unafraid to swear and tough, reminding him of Arya. I'm sure little Rookon will be a better husband to her than any potential husband. At least she wouldn't be marrying a man old enough to be her father, or even worse, a fucking Frey, Egon thought as he remembered the last time he had met some Freys, when a delegation of them had come to Winterfell, enquiring to Uncle Ned about Arto's marrying a girl of House Frey. Egon took a few steps closer to the door before he inhaled a breath of cool northern air passing through the windows. Come on, you can do this, Egon. You've faced off free folk, mammoths and giants in 3 battles and whites and white walkers in 8 battles. You can muster up the courage to speak to the man who's been the only father you've ever known and a woman who's been a second mother to you. He exhaled finally as he reached out and knocked on the door. Enter, said Uncle Eddard. Egon opened the door and took a step inside. Hello, Egon. Is everything all right? Sweetly asked Aunt Ashura with a kind smile. All is fine, Uncle Ned, Aunt Ash. I just wanted to ask a question, he said. Sit down, Egon, said Aunt Ashura, gesturing to a chair on the opposite side of Uncle Ned's desk. He sat down and faced them, nervously, for even though he had known them his whole life and had always treated him like a son, he was always uncomfortable with facing people and looking them in the eye, for it just made him feel nervous. Rhaenys is wed to Artos and Aunt Daenerys is soon to wed Harold Arryn. And now I wanted to know, what will the future hold for me, he asked, facing the slight gap between them. Whilst not looking them in the eye, he could look at both of them and focus on the opened window behind them. Uncle Eddard grimaced as he looked from his lady wife and then to Egon. It's not an easy answer, I'm afraid, Egon. You see, under normal circumstances, I might have been able to award you a keep or even a castle, that you may re-establish House Targaryen, but in the north, or even create a house outside of House Targaryen. But Robert has shown nothing but hostility for you, your sister, your aunt and your mother. What does this mean, then? It all depends on you, Egon, my dear. Whether it is staying in Winterfell and having a place in court, perhaps becoming an officer in the household guards, or even going to the wall and joining the Night's Watch, said Aunt Ashura. Maybe I should go with Aunt Daenerys to the Eyrie when she weds Harold Arryn. No, she will have Sir Alisa protecting her. Or should I stay in Winterfell, to be with Mother and Rhaenys and be an uncle to Rhaenys' children with Artos? Or should I seize my own destiny and join the Brothers of the Night's Watch? Thank you, Uncle Ned, Aunt Ash, said Egon with a nod, feeling as though there were no other options for him. Egon, Uncle Eddard called. Egon turned back around to face Uncle Eddard. I'm sorry, lad. I know that this isn't what you should have. You deserve far better than this after all you have done, said Uncle Eddard. Egon just nodded before taking his leave and closing the door behind him. He walked to the balcony overlooking the training yard, where he could see Sir Roderick training Arya and Rookon both. He smiled at seeing that before looking down to see Artos hugging Rhaenys and seeing her rest her head on his lap whilst running her hands through his hair reaching down to his shoulders. Why did I expect any different, Egon thought as he glanced at the Starks all around the courtyard. They all have their futures planned for them. But where does this leave me? An exile with no future and nothing to inherit. Interlude 3, pin page. Tymond Hill, Mark Ryder. What was Uncle Algirdas thinking? Storm Company and the Pentoshi army take on the might of Braavos, perhaps the wealthiest and most powerful of the free cities. Tymond, though eager for glory and to one day become a knight, alongside his brother Tolas, still wanted to live to be a knight first. Tymond drank from a wine cup with his brothers whilst Uncle Algirdas and Bronn were planning with the Pentoshi generals. Those Pentoshi generals should be fucking listening to Uncle Algirdas if they want to win this war, said Torwin. Why, brother? You think that we've got a chance against the Braavosis? Asked Mark. We stand a better chance with Uncle Algirdas in command, or at least making the plans. There's no way that the Pentoshi army can last against the Braavosi army, if the ones we fought at Velvet Mountains are any indication, Torwin explained. Taimon glanced around at the Pentoshi soldiers nearest to them. All looked badly trained, and some of them looked exhausted from just wearing their armor, whether it was leather, chainmail or lamella. Taimon then turned his eyes to Storm Company, now grown from a force of 1,000 sellswords to now 1,800 after the victory at the Velvet Mountains. Many of whom were young Pentoshi men looking to make their fortunes, or to simply escape from the lives they had led back home. Taimon then turned to the commander's tent, where he could see the Pentoshi generals and nobles leave alongside Algirdas and Bronn, whom were walking to Taimon and his brothers. "Brothers. Uncle Algirdas," said Taimon. They all stood up to face their youngest uncle as he joined them. "Well, my boys, these Pentoshi Chisemungas seem to possess a brain after all. They've agreed to the plans which Bronn and I suggested," said Uncle Algirdas. "Excellent. Now we stand a greater chance of victory," just as Torwin had said, Taimon thought as they walked to their own tent, where the other gathered officers of Storm Company had assembled. "So, what is the plan, my lord?" asked a Pentoshi officer, called Naridos. Uncle Algirdas gestured to the map on his desk and then explained, whilst using pieces from a Sivas board to demonstrate. "We shall make them think we are attacking them at the mountains near Goyandroi. But whilst they attack, we shall capture their campsite and burn our own. Whilst they figure out what went wrong, we shall march slowly toward them, and have a team of engineers divert the water in the nearby streams so that their troops can't get any water from the nearby streams or river. And as we march toward them, they will respond with a large-scale attack. We'll counter it with archers, and whilst they are facing the brunt of our archers, the Pentoshi cavalry shall position itself on the right flank whilst Storm Company attacks on the left flank. And with their backs to the mountains and their other sides covered by us, they will have no fucking chance of escape." Taimon and his brothers liked the plan. And strangely enough, Bronn liked it. He described it as a plan which will just break the Braavosis and crush their army in one quick slice, and without them the wiser. If that uncouth sellsword likes the plan, then it must be a good plan, and one that will succeed, Taimon thought optimistically. The next day, they had begun the plan, with the Pentoshi cavalry of 3,000 tricking the Braavosi army into giving chase, away from their campsite. Whilst they marched after them, it was Storm Company which took the camp first, killing a few guards whilst doing so. After capturing it, Taimon looked ahead at the Braavosi army with Edric. "They don't look too happy. I wonder why?" Edric wondered sarcastically. Taimon grinned as the Braavosi army had turned around and began to march back to the campsite, just as Taimon was drinking water from his water skin. "Don't drink fucking water, brother. Have some wine. Courtesy of the Braavosi generals." Taimon and Edric turned around to see Robin bringing a large goblet of wine and a tray with wine cups. The 6 brothers each took a cup and Taimon made a toast. "To Storm Company and yet another victory," said Robin before they all cheered and drank. Taimon turned back to the approaching Braavosi army before he turned to see the Pentoshi generals looking ahead whilst seated on their horses. "Reform," a bunch of Pentoshi officers began to order whilst Storm Company was ordered to march to the flank. Taimon looked around as he climbed onto his horse and spotted less than 100 men riding for what the locals called Hill Caraxes, where the river Roine connected into various streams around the area. It was so named after the Valyrian god of the sea and of water and provided much needed water for various villages in the region. "Will they do what is required of them?" "It will fucking difficult, to change the course of a river," wondered Edric. "Tywin Lannister did the same thing during the siege of Castamaria to flood and drown all of the rains," said Taimon, remembering the story from Mother and how Mother's own father was a Red Cloak of Lannisport whom had fought in the conflict. "True, but that was in a siege of a castle where Tywin had all of the time in the world. And this is a battle taking place right now," said Edric. "Don't worry, Ed. Many of the engineers going up there worked for the Northerners to build the Kalin Canal," said Robin. "Good, then we have little to fear," Taimon thought as he saw them reach the top of Hill Caraxes. They rode for the flank and as they reached a flanking point where they had a good view of the battlefield, Taimon saw how Pentoshi archers and peltastes were unleashing numerous volleys on the charging Braavosis, forcing them back, only briefly. But just as they marched to a few nearby streams, they looked around in confusion. "The engineers have succeeded. They must be so fucking thirsty right now," said Torwin with a grin as he spun his large axe around in his hand. The Braavosis turned back to face the Pentoshi army and charged once more. This time, as they charged, Taimand noticed how desperately they charged at the Pentoshis. They know that they are critically low on water. They will either win or lose with this charge on the Pentoshi positions. The moment that their infantry clashed with the Pentoshi infantry, Uncle Algirdas gave the order. Swords and lances. Swords and lances. Get ready, lads. Uncle Algirdas drew his sword and his axe whilst Taimand kept his sword at his side and held his lance and shield at the ready as he rode alongside his brothers. Charge. Ride for glory, gold and all rewards you could ever want. Storm Company. Uncle Algirdas yelled as he raised both his sword and his axe. Storm Company. Taimand yelled as he raised his lance up and cheered alongside his brothers and the rest of the company. The distance between Storm Company and the Braavosis became smaller and smaller as Taimand pointed his lance at the nearest Pentoshi infantry, just as they realized that Storm Company was almost upon them. Officers were shouting at their men to ready to face them, but Taimand grinned as he could almost taste the panic and fear in the air. Nothing can save you from Storm Company, Taimand thought with pride before his lance impaled the first two men, one standing directly behind the other. Taimand drew his sword and cut the throat of a Braavosi officer whilst the two impaled by his lance collapsed to the ground. Taimand stabbed an officer on horseback as he tried to issue commands to his men. As he withdrew his sword, the officer collapsed from his horse and fell and landed on top of a spearman trying to reach Taimand. Taimand sliced the throat of another Pentoshi before he could witness how the impact of the company and of the Braavosi cavalry was making all of the difference to the Braavosi numbers. It wasn't long, however, before remnants of the Braavosi army began to flee. Taimand roared and cheered along with his brothers and uncle as Uncle Algirdas raised both his blooded weapons in the sky and cheered with the rest of them. Chapter 15, The Dragon and the Stag. Chapter text. Artos 4. Mother. Egon. Artos. Artos and Egon had to be held back by Father, Ulrich, Bran and Theon as they stood outside of Maester Jellimund's chambers. Only moments before they could have lunch, Rhaenys water broke and she screamed as Artos carried her to the solar of the Maester of Winterfell. I need to be by her side, Artos furiously thought as Theon and Ulrich held him back. Maester Jellimund is with her, she will be all right, Ulrich said. But Artos ignored him and all others around him. The only thing he could focus on was Rhaenys as she struggled and screamed for him, for her brother and for her mother. You're almost there, my lady. You must keep going. I can see the head. Artos struggled from the grip of his younger brother and his best friend at hearing Maester Jellimund's words. He could feel tears swim down his face and sting his eyes as he heard Rhaenys cry and say how hard it was for her to breathe. At last he wrenched himself free when all heads turned to the door at the sound of a child crying. Artos opened the door and rushed to Rhaenys' side, followed closely behind by Egon. Rhaenys. Rhaenys. Egon almost yelled. Rhaenys. My love. We're all here, Artos whispered gently as he stood by her side as she lay on Maester Jellimund's examination table. Rhaenys lifted her head up weakly to see Artos and Egon and then Aunt Elia. Artos helped her sit up and then gave her a cup of water. She thirstily drank it and cried tears of joy as she hugged Artos, Egon and Aunt Elia. The hug was broken when Maester Jellimund spoke. My lord Artos. My lady Rhaenys. You have a handsome baby boy. A son. Is he all right, Maester? Is he well? Asked Rhaenys. Aye, he is, my lady, said Maester Jellimund as he finished cleaning him and wrapping him in a towel. He passed their son to Rhaenys, whom beamed at their son as she held him closely. Hello. Hello, my handsome little boy, she whispered with a gorgeous smile, reminding Artos of Aunt Elia's captivating and enchanting smile, capable of cheering up even the saddest of people. Artos kissed Rhaenys' sweating head and then the forehead of their son before he looked down at their son. My lady, I must examine you now, to see if you are in good health, said Maester Jellimund. Artos turned to Maester Jellimund in puzzlement, before both Mother and Aunt Elia grabbed him. This must be done, Mother whispered to him as Rhaenys passed their son to him and they left Maester Jellimund and Rhaenys alone once again. Father closed the door behind them as Artos gently held his son in his large and muscular arms. You are the most handsome little boy in the world, aren't you? He whispered to the boy whom had fallen fast asleep. Artois kissed his forehead and gently hugged him, taking care to listen to his breathing. Then he passed him to Mother, whom beamed as she whispered to him and showed him to Father and Aunt Elia. "I feel too young to be a grandmother," Aunt Elia commented as she held her grandson. "Have you and Rhaenys chosen a name for the newest Stark?" Father asked with an overjoyed smile. We had decided on Ricard if it was a boy and Lyra if it was a girl," Artois replied. But at the mere mention of grandmother Lyra, Artois turned to face the door, fearing for Rhaenys, after suddenly remembering how grandmother Lyra had died giving birth to Uncle Benjen and how Queen R'hllor had died giving birth to Daenerys. "She'll be all right," Artois Ulrich assured him as he patted him on the back. "Please, gods, keep her well and keep her safe. I love her so much and I cannot raise our son alone. Ricard needs his mother." Maester Jellimond opened the doors to his solar. Artois counted each footstep with bated breath as he waited for news. "She is well, my lords," he said with a smile. "Are you sure, Maester?" "Nothing at all," asked Aunt Elia with worry. "I am, my princess. She should be all right as soon as she has had plenty of sleep and food and water," said Maester Jellimond. Artois meanwhile took Ricard in his arms and walked with him to her side. "Are you well?" he asked with worry. I am," she replied before noticing him holding their son. "Oh, Ricard. My little Ricard," she said with a beaming smile before he passed her their son. She held him close to her chest and covered his head with kisses before Artois hugged her and kissed her forehead. "We have such a beautiful little boy, just as we said we would," said Artois. Yes, we do," said Rhaenys before she kissed Artois on the lips. Algedus 7. To say that the feast at the prince's palace was over-extravagant, was an understatement. It would take a lot more money for Robert or for the Lannisters to be able to even try to replicate something on this scale, Algedus thought as he looked around at the many Pentoshi generals, nobles, merchants, priests and politicians and their families as they celebrated the Treaty of Norphos. The Treaty of Norphos came after the Battle of Goyandroi and the defeat of the Braavosis to Pentos. The treaty demanded the reparation of 10 million gold gelesses and the nullification of previous treaties that Braavos had enforced upon Pentos centuries before in previous wars. Prince Tregoron intended for this to the stepping stone for Pentos' power and influence to grow further and further, and without Braavos interfering. But for Storm Company, Algedus was glad. For the victory had allowed the company to take a fair share of the spoils after the great victory, and also many more men of Pentos and other free cities and even sellswords from across the narrow sea in Westeros had chosen to join the company. Will the company soon become a force to rival even the Golden Company? Algedus thought ambitiously as he drank with his nephews. "How are you finding this all?" he asked them. "Fucking amazing, uncle, all of this. I've never seen such a thing before in my life. Especially not in King's Landing," said Tolas. "Perhaps we will see more of this, whenever Storm Company has been given a new contract by another powerful and wealthy nation," suggested Mark. "Oh, that would be glorious. So, what are you lads spending your share of the coin on?" Algedus asked, now that Prince Trigger had paid them what was promised. "Some new armor and a better sword," Uncle replied Edric. As he looked around, Algedus noticed an absentee. "Where's Torwin?" he asked. Robin pointed at one of the main doors leading onto the courtyard. Algedus saw Torwin grinning as he was holding the hands of two whores and leading them inside. "Gods, he is just like his father for his taste in battle, drinking and whoring," Algedus thought with a grin before he listened to the rest of his nephews on what they would spend their coin on. Algedus had already told Herodas to send his shares of the payments to the Iron Bank of Braavos and have it converted into Westerosi currency before sending it on to Storm's End. He had recently received a raven from Shireen that with the first shipment of coin he had sent, a barracks, smith and stable were in the process of being built and refurbishments around the keep itself were underway. And with the payment from our first battle with Braavos and now the final payment, she should have enough coin to finish all refurbishments around the keep and begin building the first few villages around the castle. And then, perhaps the walls can be rebuilt and improved upon. And finally, hire good people capable of running my household." But Algedus' thoughts were interrupted when he felt a tap on his shoulder. "Uncle," said Tymund. "Home?" asked Algedus. "See that silver-haired Valyrian over there? I think he wants to start a fight. Probably had too much to drink," he said. Algirdas looked at the silver-haired Valyrian as Timon described him as, and just from looking at him, Algirdas knew whom he was. Well, I'll be damned. I know exactly who that is. What? Who is it, uncle? Asked Tolas. That, my boys, is Viserys Targaryen. One of the last Targaryens in the world, said Algirdas. How do you know that that's him? Asked Edric. When I was last in King's Landing, last rumor of him was that he was being sheltered in Pentos by some Pentoshi magister called Illyrio. And, if you look at how he is dressed, his sword has a three-headed dragon on the pommel and the crossguard. And what sigil do you see on his doublet, Robin? Asked Algirdas. A three-headed red dragon on a black doublet, Uncle Robin replied as he sipped his wine. Does he know that we are Baratheons? Asked Edric. As if to answer Edric's question, Algirdas heard a whining shout loud. Algirdas Baratheon. Algirdas turned to the man he pointed out to his nephews, whom was trying to be calmed down by a large and overweight man wearing rich Pentoshi garb. His host in Pentos, Algirdas surmised as he faced the Targaryen claimant. Your brother murdered my brother. I will have my justice, in the name of House Targaryen. For a dragon will always burn its foes, he yelled. What sort of fucking idiot challenges someone in the middle of a feast, when we are all guests of our host here? The Prince of Pentos, no less. Algirdas took a few steps toward Viserys Targaryen. I would be glad to fight you on any other day, little dragon, but we are both guests of his grace, Prince Trigger, so let us leave the hatred and blood aside for another day and not betray the hospitality of our host, shall we not? Algirdas replied, as he turned to Viserys' friend. Calm him down before the prince has him arrested, he wanted to say as he glared at the fat merchant. Quite right. Your Grace, we are guests here. We cannot do anything rash, he tried to say diplomatically. I am the dragon. And you will die, like the coward and traitor that you are. Like your brother is, he snapped as he drew his sword and pointed it at Algirdas. All guests of the prince turned to the scene in shock as Viserys Targaryen pointed his sword at Algirdas, whom was only a few feet away from the point of his sword. There was a deafening silence in the gardens whilst the prince's unsullied guards all leveled spears and a few began to walk toward Viserys Targaryen. What the fuck do I do? Algirdas thought before he noticed the table nearest to him. Put that down, you drunken lizard, before you hurt yourself, or before Prince Trigger has your balls cut off, Algirdas threatened darkly, whilst walking to the table. To all around, including Viserys, he made sure that they saw him put his wine cup down. But what they didn't see, was when his fingers reached for a fork and he tucked it inside the sleeve of his doublet. I am the dragon and lord of the seven kingdoms, I do not fear anyone, least of all pathetic stags such as you, he snarled. It was a stag that killed your brother and it was a lion that killed your father. And it is direwolves raising your sister, niece and nephew, Algirdas replied with a grin as he raised his right hand slightly so that the fork would be tucked at his elbow, and that all he had to do, was straighten his arm and the fork would fall to his wrist and he could grab it if needed. Viserys yelled out pathetically as he sliced his sword across at Algirdas' throat. Algirdas ducked underneath the blow and he straightened his arm and felt the fork leave his elbow. He grabbed it as it reached the cuff and he grabbed Viserys by his shoulder with his left hand and with his right, he stabbed Viserys in the chest. Viserys stared in shock at him whilst Algirdas twisted the fork around, causing his sword to fall onto the marble floor. He spat blood all over Algirdas' face before he looked down at where he had just stabbed him. Viserys coughed blood and choked on it as Algirdas drew the fork out of his belly and he collapsed to his knees. Algirdas dropped the fork whilst Viserys finally choked his last. Chapter 16, A Change in Power. Chapter text. Ashura v. Dead. Gods, Ashura thought as she put the letter down. Grave news, my lady, said Maester Jellimund. Indeed, Maester. Indeed. Gather our household, my children, Elia, Daenerys and Elia's children into the solar. We'll speak more later, said Ashura. Yes, my lady. And Lord Stark. I will bring the news to him, she said before she left Maester Jellimund's solar. Ashura worried for Ned and for Elia at the news that had just arrived from Maester Jellimund as she spotted two of her children sparring on the training yard. Where is your father? She had asked Ulrich as he and Deanna had reached a stalemate in their duel, for whilst Ulrich was stronger and harder, Deanna was faster and very quick at reacting with her shield. He is in the Godswood, Mother said Deanna. Ashura walked to the Godswood and found Ned seated underneath the heart tree. She was glad that with the end of the War of the Long Night, there was no more deserters of the Night's Watch to execute. For even if it was his duty, she never again wanted to fear for her husband or her children in times of war. But now her fear was not because of war, but because of the dreaded Game of Thrones she had learned to play when she served as Elia's lady-in-waiting in the Red Keep all those years ago. She was glad that she hadn't needed to play the game ever since marrying Ned and living in Winterfell with him and their family. But now, the situation was dire, and she knew that it would affect her, Ned, Elia and their children. Ned, she said as she came closer, whilst Ned looked down at the water below the heart tree. He looked up with a beaming smile at her as she came to sit down beside him. Ash, he said as she sat down, and he leant in to kiss her on the lips. She reached up and held his face with both hands and held the kiss. Even after nearly 20 years of marriage, Ashura's love for her husband had never changed from when they first began to court at Harrenhal. She loved everything about Ned, from his quiet nature, his care towards his subjects, the iron will to always do what was right, no matter what it cost, his disdain for boasting of his actions, his never-ending love for her and their family, and his beautiful grey eyes. She never liked how people would always dismiss him, back from when he was just a second son of a Lord Paramount, and even when he did become Lord Paramount of the North after the rebellion's end, nobles of the South thought little of the Lord of Winterfell, as though he was a barbaric savage. But Ashura loved living in the North. She loved having her husband and children beside her in Winterfell. She loved the people of the Winterfell and meeting them in her tours around the Winter City alongside Ned and their children. She was proud of all that she and Ned had accomplished since they first began to rule Winterfell and the North together. And she loved it especially when Ned had built a bathhouse specially for her from her love of warm baths. And it was a tray shared by her, Elia, Daenerys, Egon, Rhaenys, Deanna and Arya. "How are you? And how are the children?" he asked. "They are all well. As is our grandson," she replied with a smile. "A grandson," he said with a happy sigh. "Never did I think I would be a grandfather at 37, he exclaimed with a grin. Ashura smiled, hoping that he wouldn't notice that she hadn't answered the first question as she wrapped her arm around his shoulders. "And, how are you?" he asked. "Damn. Well, it must be done," she thought. "I am so sorry, my love," she said as she held both of his hands with her left hand and reached for his face hand with her right hand. "What is it? Tell me," he said with worry. "Jon Arryn is dead," she replied. His grey eyes changed from their bright shine to a dull and saddened gaze as he turned to the water of the heart tree. How? How could he finally asked. "I am so sorry," she said once again before kissing his cheek and hugging him. He hugged back as she could feel his tears fall from his eyes and land on her shoulder. "It's okay, Ned. It's okay," she whispered as she rubbed his back before kissing his head. "How did he die?" he asked as they broke from the hug and Ashura kissed him again and caressed his cheek. "The Raven said a fever," she replied. "Raven? Whom was it from?" he asked. "Robert," she replied. Ned ran his hands through his long hair as he rested his back against the heart tree. "I may not have known him well, but he was always a kind man," said Ashura. "He was more than that. He turned a quiet and easily frightened little boy into the man whom is your husband," he replied as he held onto her hands tightly. "There was more." Ned turned to her apprehensively. "More? What do you mean?" he asked worriedly. "Robert rides for Winterfell, with his entire royal party," she explained. "With Robert coming all of the way here, it won't be just to share in their grief over the man whom was their foster father. All of this way. With the entire royal party," Ned said, repeating her words with sorrow, knowing full well what Robert would say. "If he asks, I will say no. My place is here, in Winterfell. With you, our children, our grandchild and our people," said Ned. "I know, Ned. I know it is. Our place will always be here. But Robert, he may become paranoid. He may just think that your refusal means that you plot against him to put the Targaryens on the throne," she said. "He's not stupid, he won't think that," Ash, he replied. "Perhaps he wouldn't. But the Lannisters and players of the game around him might just persuade him of that," she explained. "After all, he did think that it was because of me that you protect Elia, her children and Daenerys. Interlude 4, fan casting Anna Popplewell as Triss Merigold in The Witcher but with Rain actors on my cast. Serena Stark, Anna Popplewell. Serena smiled as she finished sewing the last part of Daenerys' wedding dress. All done, Dany. Serena said with excitement before she found her cup of Summerisle's pineapple juice, her favorite drink. Serena preferred to drink fruit juices and would only drink wine, beer or mead at feasts or special occasions. Dany looked at where Serena had just finished. That's beautiful, Serena. Well done, said Dany as she held it up to the light pouring in from the window. Well, try it on, Dany Jane eagerly insisted. They helped Dany put the dress on, and it was just as Daenerys had wanted it. More silver than it was white, and with images of dragons on the back and front of the dress and with falcons also embroidered alongside the dragons. As she looked at herself in the mirror, Daenerys smiled at how she looked. Gods, she is so beautiful, Serena thought. Serena, Daenerys, Rhaenys, Lyanna, Jane and Beth's efforts in making Daenerys' wedding dress were halted when Rhaenys had given birth to Serena's nephew, Ricard. And even after the birth, they had spent a long time helping Rhaenys and caring for Ricard whenever Artos and Rhaenys went for a ride together in the Wolf's Wood or for when they would go with mother and father and visit a Bannerman. Gods, you look so beautiful, Daenerys said Lyanna with admiration. Thank you, Elle. Thank you, everyone, Daenerys said with a beaming smile before hugging her niece and her friends. There was a knock on the door. Princesses. My ladies. Lord and Lady Stark summon you all to their solar, said Sir Alisa. Oh. Thank you, Sir Alisa, but did they say why? Asked Daenerys. They did not, my princess. Only that it was very important that you all come at once, he replied. Serena stood up with her eldest sister and her good sister whilst Daenerys was helped out of her wedding dress by Jane and Beth. Once Daenerys dressed into her original dress, they walked together to Father and Mother Solar, where Deanna, Arya, Artos, Brandon, Ulrich, Rickon, Aegon and Theon already were there. Seated beside Mother and Father were Aunt Elia, Maester Jellimond and Beth's father, Sir Roderick, and Jane's father, Veon. What could this be about that all of us are here? Has something happened? Is there another war? Please, gods, don't let there be another war. I don't want Father, my brothers, Deanna, Theon and Aegon to all have to go to war again, Serena wondered with fearful anticipation. You should all be seated for this. This is all very important, said Father. Serena sat in between Daenerys and Lyanna as she glanced at Ulrich, her twin. He shrugged his shoulders when he saw her. Serena's fears increased when she saw Aunt Elia and how she attempted a brave face, but she could see the fear on her face. Serena was quick at reading people's expressions and facial movements. My former foster father and hand of the king, Jon Arryn, has died, Father said, pausing whilst he took a deep breath and ran his hand through his hair, which Serena recognized as what he usually did when he was taking time to say something that upset him. Gods, poor father. He would always tell us stories of how kind Jon Arryn was when raising him. Wait, if he is dead, does that mean that Harold Arryn is now Lord of the Eyrie? Father, I am so sorry, said Lyanna sweetly. Thank you, Eli, said Father with a pained smile. Mother held Father's hand until he continued speaking. But now, King Robert, Queen Cersei and the royal procession ride for Winterfell. According to a raven from our friends in the Riverlands, they just passed through Castle Daenerys' lands, said Father. The Baratheons and Lannisters are coming here. Gods, what if they try to harm Rhaenys, Aegon, Daenerys and Aunt Elia? Aegon was looking up at Father as he spoke, but at the mention of the two houses which wanted him, his sister, his aunt and his mother dead, he frowned furiously as he fixed his gaze on his hands, as though envisioning them stabbing all whom dared to harm his family. But, Father, why would they come all this way? Surely King Robert would want to choose another hand of the king, asked Serena. Mother smiled when she turned to Serena. You have the right of it, Serena. We think that that is why they come to Winterfell, so that our king will choose your father to be hand of the king, said Mother, though her sarcasm at how she pronounced king was easily noticed. He won't try and harm us, will he? Daenerys asked with worry as her hands shook. He would not dare to, Dany. I promise to you. Even with every Lannister and Baratheon in the north, I swear that none of you shall be harmed, Father promised. But in the meantime, even with the arrival of an unwelcome visit, we must make Winterfell as presentable as possible for them. There are still a great many in the south whom think of the north as a land of barbarians and savages. We shall not give them the satisfaction of proving that lie true, said Mother. All but Lyanna, Deanna, Serena, Arya, Brandon, Ulrich and Rickon stay. There is one other matter I would discuss, said Father. Everyone else but the Starks left, leaving Serena wondering why Father had them stay. But then she realized what it could mean when she noticed a few opened letters on Father's desk, ones with the sigils of houses Marndale and Bolton. Rickon and Ulrich, the arrangements have all been completed, and Ulrich, as soon as you are wed to Jane, you shall both take your places as Lord and Lady of House Kelstark of Moat Cailin, said Mother before she passed him a document to him. Serena smiled as Ulrich was passed this document, confirming that he was now a lord and with his own house and seat. I can't wait for their wedding, they've been waiting for this day for so long, Serena thought as she remembered the ring Ulrich had bought to propose to Jane Poole with. Father, Mother. Thank you, so much, he said with a beaming smile. Serena beamed for her twin as she was the first to congratulate and hug him before the others could. And am I to be Lord of Wolf's Den, Father? Asked Rickon. You are, Rickon. You are. Once you are of age at 5 and 10. But first, Lord Marndale has agreed to foster you at White Harbour and for you to serve as squire to his son and heir, Sir Willis, said Father before patting him on the shoulder. And give him the chance of meeting Wyler Marndale, Serena realized. And then Father turned to Deanna. We informed Lord Bolton that you had accepted the proposal by Domeric and he has agreed for your wedding to take place here in Winterfell 1 moon from now, he said. Given how they both shared a love for archery and for horse riding, Serena understood how her elder sister and the heir to the Dreadfort had begun to enjoy each other's company when they began to court during the War of the Long Night. And then Mother turned to Serena. Now, is there any whom has caught your eye, Serena? Now, you needn't be afraid or try and come up with a random name to please us. We just want to know if any northern lord has wanted to court you. Serena blushed as she thought of him and his charming smile and way of making her feel at ease. Well, there is one, Mother, she replied. Oh, and whom could that be? Mother asked with a teasing smile. Brandon Dustin, she admitted. Does he feel the same way? Asked Father. He does, Father. We have often talked of what it would be like if we had wed and lived at Barrowton, said Serena, hoping that she wouldn't get Bran in trouble. We'll send a raven to Willam Dustin this evening. As for you, Lyanna. Is there anyone you would want to be wed to? Asked Father. Serena was glad that they were asking if they would want to be wed and whom they would want to wed. She loved hearing the stories of how Mother and Father had met from them, Uncle Benjen, Uncle Arthur and Aunt Elia. And she loved that they were happy and that they married out of love, not because it was arranged between their own parents and that they wanted the same for their children. Not yet, Father, said Lyanna. Lyanna is so beautiful, it's unreal. But there must be someone whom has caught her eye. She is called the Star of the North and I've seen how Smalljanumber, the Karstark brothers and the Ryswell brothers would often trip over each other trying to ask her for her hand during a dance at a feast, thought Serena. Chapter 17, The Arryns and the Baratheons. Chapter text. Daenerys 3. First I am to wed Harold Arryn and be away from the only home I've ever known. And now, we are to wed when the Baratheons and Lannisters are coming here, to Winterfell. Daenerys was afraid of what the visit by King Robert would mean for her, her nephew and niece and her good sister as they prepared for the arrival of Harold Arryn. With the death of his father, Harold Arryn was now Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale and Warden of the East. And he was expected to arrive with his mother, Lysa Tully, and select members of the Vale nobility, from houses Royce of Runestone, Royce of the Bloody Gate, Waynwood, Redfort, Belmore, Grafton, Linderley, Templeton, Coldwater, Corbray, Hunter and Sunderland. Daenerys had already met the Royces of Runestone when Bronze Yohn Royce had visited Winterfell on occasions with his sons Ander, Robar, Waymar and his daughter Lysilla. And now, not only was she leaving Winterfell, but so were Deanna, Ulrich, Serena and Rickon. Daenerys was sat in her chambers on the day that the Arryns and the nobility of the Vale were to arrive in Winterfell. She had heard many stories about her betrothed since the day she had been told by Uncle Ned that she was to marry him by order of King Robert. She had heard that he was one of the most handsome men in the Seven Kingdoms. That he was as good a jouster as Loras Tyrell and as skilled a swordsman as Bronze Yohn Royce. But then there were the stories that didn't talk of how handsome he was or his skill as expected of a knight. There was the story of him having a child out of wedlock, a bastard daughter with a tavern wench, a girl called Alice Stone. She hadn't met him the day he and a few of his friends from the Vale had come in attendance to represent House Arryn at Arto's and Rhaenys' wedding. She had been too nervous to meet him and was more interested in being by her niece and representing House Targaryen than wanting to meet her betrothed. She heard a knock on the door. "Princess. Might I enter?" asked Sir Alisa. "Aye, please, Sir Alisa," she replied. Sir Alisa opened the door and smiled sadly as he saw her and then sat beside her on her bed. "I was to inform you that the Arryns and Valyman are here," he said. She nodded whilst looking down at the bracelet, decorated with silver and amethyst dragons, gifted to her on her 10th name a day by Elia, saying that Rolla had given it to her to give to Daenerys. Ever since, Daenerys would keep it, not merely as a parting gift from Mother, but as a source of comfort and of strength whenever she was unhappy. "Mother called me her little dragoness, and Elia said that Rhaenys, Aegon and I are the last dragons, Sir Alisa. But now, I just feel so frightened of being married to a man I don't know and to live in a place I have never been before," she said. Sir Alisa smiled before he put his hand on her shoulder. "Your mother was perhaps the bravest and hardiest woman to ever be Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, Princess. And she was also one of the kindest, and she loved you. Even as she held you with her last dying breath, she loved and cared for you. And I swore to her that I would protect you," he said. "She, more than any other great Targaryen knight, prince or king, was more deserving to call herself a dragon. And she lives on in you, Princess. I see that now, and I have always seen it in you. Never forget that you are a dragon, Princess, nor that your mother watches over you. Even if you cannot see her, she is by your side and in that bracelet," said Sir Alisa. "And I will always be at your side, Princess. And if this Arryn boy dares harm you, I will gladly kill him," he replied. Daenerys giggled before she hugged Sir Alisa. "Thank you, Sir Alisa," she said. "Always, my princess." "Now, shall we go before we are missed?" he asked. They left her chambers, and Daenerys felt more confident as she walked through the great keep and into the courtyard, where she stood next to Elia, Aegon and Rhaenys, whilst Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashera stood at the front, ready to greet Harold Arryn and Lysa Tully. Daenerys shivered, even as she clasped her hands underneath her winter bear fur cloak. But even as she tried to warm herself, she knew that the shivers weren't from the cold wind, but rather from the sound of numerous horses approaching the gates of the great keep. The gates were opened and the first to ride through were horsemen holding the blue banners with a white falcon and moon of House Arryn. And trailing after them were what seemed like 4 dozen men and a wheelhouse. At the front of the party was a man dressed in riding leathers and wearing a cloak with the Arryn sigil on it. As he rode closer to the waiting Starks, Daenerys saw him clearly and decided whom he was. He was very handsome. She could see that the stories which said as such were all true. He had an eagle-like nose, she noticed, as he climbed down from his horse, and was muscular and bore a slight scar on his cheek, which only seemed to make him more attractive. "Harold Arryn. My Lord Arryn, welcome to Winterfell," said Uncle Eddard before shaking hands with the new and young Lord of the Eyrie. "My Lord Stark. Lady Stark," he said before kissing the hand of Aunt Ashera and accepting the offer of bread and salt by a servant. And then from out of the wheelhouse climbed a slender and delicate woman, younger than Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashera, but smiling as she walked out and stood by Harold Arryn's side. "Lady Arryn, welcome to Winterfell," said Uncle Eddard before he kissed her hand. "Thank you, Lord and Lady Stark." "And is this my beautiful future goddaughter?" she asked when she saw Daenerys. Daenerys took a deep breath when she laid eyes on her and was followed by her son. "Yes, it is." "Daenerys, come, my dear," said Aunt Ashera with a sweet smile. "I am a dragon, just like you, mother," Daenerys thought as she rubbed her thumb over her dragon bracelet and walked toward the Arryns before bowing her head to them both. "Princess Daenerys, an honor," said Harold Arryn, whom kissed her hand, with a gorgeous smile that Daenerys couldn't help but smile at, as she noticed how his dimples showed as he smiled. Daenerys shivered slightly as he kissed her hand. "My Lord Arryn. My lady. Veon shall now escort you to the first keep, that you may rest from your journey," said Uncle Eddard. "My thanks, Lord Stark," said Harold Arryn. "Lord Stark. I gather that the king is visiting Winterfell," asked Lady Arryn. "He is, my lady. "He is expected within a week at the least, 10 days at the most," replied Uncle Eddard. "And soon after his arrival, Ulrich and Jane shall be wed, and then they can go to Moat Cailin as Lord and Lady Kelstark." The first keep of Winterfell had once been the home of the Stark kings in the north before it fell into ruin and the Great Keep was built. In recent years, Uncle Ned had rebuilt the first keep that it may be used by guests to Winterfell to rest. In view that the nobility of the Vale were visiting, Daenerys thought that it was wise Uncle Ned had done it. It certainly housed all of the noble guests visiting for Arto's and Rhaenys' wedding, she remembered as she walked back inside with Sir Alisa behind her as she walked with Rhaenys, Lyanna, Serena, Jane and Beth. "Are you okay, Dany?" asked Beth. Relieved in a way. "I had been nervous that that would have been difficult, and that he would have been rude and impertinent," Daenerys admitted. "Dany." Daenerys turned around to see Aunt Ashera and Elia. She walked toward them when Elia beckoned her to join them. "Are you all right?" Elia asked as she held a caring hand on her shoulder. "I am. I should be," she replied with a brave smile. "Just remember, in the next few days before the wedding, it will be your chance to spend a little time courting with Harold Arryn. But, if he shows even the slightest dishonorable intention or tries to harm you, let us know, and I promise you, we will end the marriage between you both," Aunt Ashera promised. "Thank you, Aunt Ashera," said Daenerys. "And failing that, Sir Alisa will gladly kill him," added Elia. Daenerys glanced at Sir Alisa, whom grinned. "It would be my pleasure, my princess," he confirmed. Aegon v. The whole of the first keep had been temporarily converted into a September in preparation for the wedding of Harold Arryn and Aunt Daenerys, and Septon Medric, the household Septon of House Marndale, had come to officiate for the wedding. Aegon was dressed in clothes to show that he was indeed a Targaryen and that he was unafraid of the world seeing that. "I am a dragon, and I will not be intimidated by any man or woman of the north, the south or anywhere else in the world. And if they keep sending killers after me, let them come, and I'll keep sending their killers back to them, dead." Aegon took a deep breath as he held on to Aunt Daenerys' hand as they almost entered the hall of the first keep. "Are you ready, Aunt Daenerys?" he asked. "I am, Aegon." "Thank you," she replied with a soft smile. He nodded nervously back as he listened to all of the chatter from inside, from the nobility of the Vale on one side and the Starks of Winterfell and his own family on the other side, whilst resting the palm of his hand on the door's handle. Because Aegon was the only male Targaryen here, he was the one to lead Aunt Daenerys down the aisle to her betrothed. "If Harold Arryn dares to mistreat her, I will cut him to pieces. I don't care what the words to his house are, I will chop his cock and balls off if he dares to lay an ill-intentioned hand on her." "It's okay, Aegon. It's time," said Aunt Daenerys as she stroked his shoulder affectionately. He nodded as he inhaled and forcefully shut his eyes as he tightened his grip on the door's handle and turned it down before exhaling and opening the door. He led Aunt Daenerys down the aisle, with all of the Arryns and their bannermen looking at the both of them and whispering amongst themselves. "There he is. That's him. Aegon Targaryen. Father. That's Aegon, the son of Rhaegar and Elia. Well, I'll be damned. The last man of the Targaryens. Aegon Targaryen. Gods, he is handsome. With the king coming, will he have him executed, father?" Aegon curled his free hand into a fist and forcefully closed his eyes briefly before leading Aunt Daenerys to Harold Arryn. He bowed his head to the Lord of the Eyrie before lifting Aunt Daenerys' veil up and letting all see her, including her betrothed. Aegon took his leave from Aunt Daenerys without a word and keenly walked hastily to join Mother. "You may bring the bride under your protection," said Septon Medric to Harold Arryn. He smiled charmingly at her as he unfastened his cloak, embroidered with the soaring falcon and moon of House Arryn, and gently took off Aunt Daenerys' Targaryen embroidered cloak and placed it aside and wrapped his Arryn cloak around her. As the Arryn cloak was clasped around her, the Septon of White Harbour spoke aloud for all present to hear. "My lords, my ladies. We stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of husband and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever." And as they held hands, he tied a ribbon around their holding hands and said, "Let it be known that Harold Arryn and Daenerys Targaryen are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder." As they held hands, Aegon glanced at Harold Arryn, and saw how he smiled. For a moment, he thought that he looked almost as nervous as Aunt Daenerys. Egon's mind was returned to the wedding as Septon Medric untied and unravelled the ribbon. Once completed, Septon Medric raised his loud and strong voice to announce to the entire audience in the sight of the seven, "I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity." He looked back down at Erin and Aunt Daenerys. "Look upon each other and say the words. Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger," they said together. "I am hers and she is mine. From this day, until the end of my days," said Harold with his charming smile. "I am his and he is mine. From this day, until the end of my days," said Aunt Daenerys. "With this kiss, I pledge my love," said Harold Arryn before kissing her. Aegon's hands clenched into fists when he saw Arryn kiss Aunt Daenerys. "Mistreat her, and I don't care how many Knights of the Vale stand between me and you, I will kill you." Aegon clapped as the two walked down the aisle together, and both parties met again in the feasting hall of the Great Keep, where Aegon looked at the two to see if Aunt Daenerys was all right. "Gods, please protect her. Do not let her suffer, here in Winterfell, in the Eyrie or anywhere in the world," Aegon would pray that night at the gods would. The next morning, Aegon waited for Daenerys in the feasting hall of the Great Keep alongside Mother, Rhaenys, Uncle Ned, Aunt Ashera, Artos, Brandon, Ulrich, Lyanna, Deanna, Serena and Theon. Aunt Daenerys joined them with Sir Alisa following closely behind her. "Daenerys, are you all right?" Mother asked worriedly. "I am fine, Elia, I promise I am fine," said Daenerys with a smile. "He didn't mistreat you then?" Uncle Ned asked, as Aegon remembered when they had left for the bedding. "No, I told him that I wasn't ready and he just nodded and said when you are, I will be too. And then we just fell asleep together. Nothing happened, other than a few kisses," said Aunt Daenerys. But whilst Aegon's mood was recovering in the aftermath of Aunt Daenerys' wedding to his now Uncle Harold, his mood was soured 3 days later at the reminder of the royal visit from Robert Baratheon, Cersei Lannister and their entourage. Aunt Ashera and her children were only glad for the chance to see Sir Arthur Dayne again. Mother and Aunt Ashera had always spoken highly of the knights whom had turned from House Targaryen and served Robert the Usurper. Drold Hightower, the White Bull, a great knight and very strong and skilled still in his 60s. Barristan Selmy, the Bold, one of the greatest of swordsmen and jousters in the Seven Kingdoms. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, as great a swordsman as Barristan Selmy, whom wielded the Dane Star Steel Sword, Dawn. Oswell Went, the Laughing Bat, a skilled and humorous knight. All were great and honourable knights, and yet chose to serve the usurper. But as he remembered the story of the throne room that day, when none of them stopped Uncle Ned when he threatened Robert the Usurper, Tywin Lannister and all other fools whom would have wished harm and death upon he, Mother, Rhaenys and Aunt Daenerys. "Will we have to be presented before them when they arrive, Uncle Ned?" asked Rhaenys as they were all gathered in his solar. "I am afraid so. He may be many things, but he is not so stupid that he would demand your deaths when you have committed no crimes and you are here, in Winterfell and the North, where the Southerners have no friends," Uncle Ned assured them. "That may be so, but that won't stop them sending murderers to kill me," Aegon thought as he remembered the two killers of Lor and Lork whom he and Griff had killed. Aegon missed Griff when he had departed the day after Aunt Daenerys' wedding. "Where will you go?" Aegon asked. "Wherever my feet take me, little dragon. I may travel a while in the Riverlands and perhaps the Vale," he replied. "The enemies you spoke of that forced you from your home. Would they remember you, after all this time?" "There's a chance they might forget, but I would never put my family at risk, as I'm sure you would understand," he explained. "Well, good luck, wherever your travels take you, and I hope to see you one day soon again," said Aegon with a smile as he offered his hand. "Thank you, Aegon. You take care of yourself." "I hope we do see each other again," he replied with a nod as they shook hands and he patted him on the shoulder. Aegon restlessly left his chambers the day of the visit and joined his family when Arya had come rushing inside the Great Keep, Nymeria running at her side, shouting, "They are here! The Baratheons and Lannisters are here! What will they do when they see me?" Aegon wondered as he rested his hand on the pommel of Blackfyr. Aegon stood at between Mother and Rhaenys as Rhaenys held Ricard in her arms. Daenerys had Sir Alisa standing behind her as the gates to the courtyard opened. And from there, soldiers under the banners of the Crowned Stag of House Baratheon and the Roaring Lion of House Lannister were the first to ride into the courtyard. They were followed by knights wearing the golden-plated armor of the Kingsguard, as Aegon recognized from the last trip Sir Arthur Dayne had made to Winterfell, when Aegon was 12. Aegon took a deep breath as the Kingsguard were followed by a grossly fat man in rich riding leathers he had seen worn by fat southern merchants when visiting Winterfell. And behind the fat man was a wheelhouse, decorated with red and gold decorations and the banner of House Lannister hanging from it. On a closer look at the fat man, Aegon raised a brow. His hair was black, wild and thick, long and reaching down past his shoulders, and his enormous beard reached down to his sternum. He was red-faced, his arms and legs were thick, not with fat, but with muscle. His belly looked as though he was carrying a child. Robert Baratheon, the Demon of the Trident. This is the man whom slew my father at the Trident with his huge war hammer. Peace has cost you your self-respect and the friends you once had and could count on. Victory has defeated you in more ways than one. Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera reluctantly fell to their knees, and were followed by all in the courtyard, though Aegon was angry to be kneeling to the same man whom wanted to kill him when he was just a babe of 1. Rise, rise, came a command. Aegon peeked up to see Robert the Usurper gesturing to Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera to rise. They did so, and were followed by their children, Theon, Aegon, his family and the household of House Stark. Your Grace, said Uncle Ned. Ned, gods, it's good to see you, bellowed the usurper. Acting as though nothing has happened between the two of you ever since that day, Aegon thought. Uncle Ned smiled before he accepted a hug from the usurper, whom laughed as they hugged, but Uncle Ned did no such thing. As they broke from the hug, he turned to Aunt Ashera. Ashera. Your Grace, said Aunt Ashera, whom stifled her face as he kissed her hand, as though he was something one had coughed into their handkerchief, before Robert the usurper turned back to Uncle Ned. Ned, now, where are your family? He asked before turning to the Stark children without another word. He met Artos first, whom stood as tall as he and almost as foreboding as he must have been in his youth. You must be Artos. Gods, you look like your uncles Brandon and Arthur. Your Grace, replied Artos with a nod as they shook hands before the usurper turned to Lyanna. Keep your eyes and your hands far away from her, you fucking drunk mammoth, Aegon thought with anger. Gods, you are a vision, my lady. You are Lyanna. I am, your Grace, she replied sweetly, just as the wheelhouse door opened. Aegon turned his eye to the wheelhouse, where he saw whom could only be Cersei Lannister climb out, accompanied by 3 children. Looking at them, Cersei Lannister was a very beautiful woman, he could see, thought not nearly as beautiful as Aunt Ashera. And he saw the haughty smile adorned on her face, as though she was superior to all around her. And then there was her children. The eldest, a tall boy, but with arms punier than Arya's, was clearly Joffrey. He was golden-haired like his mother, and was handsome, but also like his mother, he had a haughty and supercilious grin as he looked around at the courtyard and all inside. Another son, smaller and as young as Rickon, looked happy to be out of the wheelhouse and looked around at all with a vivid curiosity. And then there was the girl, whom looked like the same age as Serena. She was very pretty and had an innocent smile as she looked at her father meeting the Stark children. But as Robert the usurper finished meeting each of the Stark children, he was walking back to Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera when he caught sight of Aegon looking at him. I'm not afraid of you, Aegon wanted to shout at the man whom had wanted him dead when he was not old enough to speak properly. So, the last of the Targaryens. Robert walked past Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera and looked at Aegon, then Rhaenys and then Daenerys. Do you know what your father did to my betrothed, little lizard? He demanded. Since when has a son been guilty of the crimes of his father? I do, your Grace, he replied with a bow of his head, determined to not show any fear to him. Oh. Your Grace, is it? Lork and Swigert told me a great many things about you in their report, boy, he said. Aegon fixed him with a hard glare as Cersei Lannister walked toward them, followed by Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera, both of whom regarded this with fearful suspense. He had no such sympathy from Cersei Lannister, when he saw how she glared at him. The son of Rhaegar Targaryen. You look like your father, did you know that? I should know better than any other, he said proudly with a chuckle. The similarities stop right fucking there, for I at least have my honor, Aegon thought as he resisted the urge to stab him in the balls. And then he turned to Rhaenys. And now, the future Lady of the North. Rhaenys Targaryen. And is that the future Lord Stark there? Yes. Your Grace. His name is Ricard, she replied. A sweet little boy. A damned shame about his mother, he muttered before turning to Aunt Daenerys. Aegon, Athos and Sir Jeremy furiously glared at the back of Robert as he walked toward Aunt Daenerys. And the last, Daenerys Targaryen, he said. Daenerys Arryn, your grace. Aegon turned around to see Harold Arryn walk toward Daenerys until he stood by her side whilst Sir Alisa hatefully scowled at Robert the usurper. Harry. I truly am sorry to dump you with a lizard girl for a wife when you deserve better, said the man whom killed father. I have no complaint to say about my wife, your grace, nor will I hear any about her, he replied. What? Where did this come from? Does he feel for Aunt Daenerys? Or does he simply take his house's words as high as honor very seriously? So, I see. And what say all you Targaryens? Do you wish me dead? Do you wish to usurp me and take back the throne that once belonged to your ancestors? He asked as he walked back to face all three of them. No, your grace, the three said. But he just ignored them before turning to Uncle Ned. Take me to your crypts. I would pay my respects. Chapter 18, One Less Dragon. Chapter text. Lyanna 3. Lyanna was angry at the cruel and fat excuse of a king. How can he be so cruel as to say such things about Aegon, Rhaenys and Daenerys? They've never done anything to him. From a young age, Mother and Aunt Elia had taught Lyanna and her siblings that a child is not responsible for the crimes of their father. It was a lesson that stuck with Lyanna. How can that man look at himself in the mirror and call himself a king? What would Aunt Lyanna think of him if she could see him right now? What sort of man hates people for no other than reason than whom their parents are? Only an idiot, Lyanna thought as she watched as father led King Robert from the courtyard and towards the crypts. Lyanna smiled at Daenerys and Rhaenys as she and Jane walked with them and with Aunt Lyanna. Are you both okay? Lyanna asked. I am fine, Eli. I am. Just glad that is all over, for now, said Daenerys. Lyanna smiled in reply before she noticed how sad Aegon looked as he frowned and looked at his feet whilst walking slowly to the door of the Great Keep. Aunt Elia, said Lyanna. Aunt Elia turned to Lyanna, whom nodded in Aegon's direction. You all go inside, I shall take Aegon aside, said Aunt Elia. I'll come also, said Lyanna. Aunt Elia smiled affectionately at Lyanna as they walked together to Aegon. Thank you, Lyanna. Aegon always seems to be cheered up whenever you are near, said Aunt Elia. I don't know about that, Aunt, replied Lyanna. Lyanna. Lyanna turned around with Aunt Elia to face Uncle Arthur. Uncle Arthur, said Lyanna with a beaming smile before hugging him. Hello, my beautiful niece. Gods, you've grown up so much since we last saw each other, said Uncle Arthur as they broke from the hug. Lyanna noticed how he smiled when he turned to Aunt Elia. Hello, Elia. Hello, Arthur. You haven't changed at all, she said with her beautiful and uplifting smile. It was that smile that for years, Lyanna would try and mimic and be like Aunt Elia as a little girl. She had managed to come up with such a smile, but not nearly did it have the effect that Aunt Elia had on people. She could tell that it certainly had an interesting effect on Uncle Arthur. Just from that smile, he turned from a tall and honorable knight into a something that resembled a shy and blushing boy. Nor have you, Elia, he said before he was joined by 4 other knights. Princess Elia, they each said, bowing their heads to her. From looking at each of them, Lyanna could guess as to whom they were. Sirs. It's so good to see you all once again, in spite of the circumstances, Aunt Elia said. There was a young one, father's age, whom was very handsome and with shoulder-length golden hair and eyes as green as emeralds. His sheathed sword at his side glimmered gold like his armor, and like his hair. Sir Jaime Lannister. There was one, younger than Uncle Arthur, but older than father, and whose smile had lines on the side, as though he was often grinning and laughing, and he carried a helm with a bat image carved on the side. Sir Oswell went. And then there were 2 older knights. One was tall and brawny, whom looked almost as strong as a Mormont, but nowhere near as muscular as an Umber. His hair was white and his face wrinkled with wrinkles of old age and of scars of battles and duels fought and won. Lord Commander, Sir Gerald Hightower. And finally, a tall man with white hair, and pale blue eyes. He looked almost as muscular as Sir Gerald, but he looked far more agile and fast than the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. In spite of his old age and numerous scars on his face and hands, he was still a handsome man and had a kind and gentle smile as he faced Aunt Elia. "Sabaristan Selmy. Sirs, might I introduce you to the Star of the North, Lady Eliana Stark," said Aunt Elia as Egon walked towards them. "Sirs," said Eliana with the smile she learned from Aunt Elia. "My lady, you look every bit the image of your lady mother," said Sir Oswell. "My thanks, Sir Oswell," she replied. "Oh, and clever as well. Clearly got that from your mother and not your father, I suppose," said Sir Oswell with a devious grin which made Eliana smirk. "Forgive his japing tongue, my dear. He clearly hasn't changed since last I saw of him," said Aunt Elia. "Might I ask how you knew I am Sir Oswell of House Went, my lady?" asked Sir Oswell. "Your helm, sir," she replied, pointing at the bat image on it. The knights chuckled, whilst Sir Oswell laughed. "Which means, you are Sabaristan of House Selmy," she said as she turned to Sabaristan. "Indeed, my lady, I am," said a smiling Sabaristan. "And that means that you are Lord Commander Hightower and you are Sir Jaime Lannister," she finished. "A fine eye for detail, my lady," said Lord Commander Hightower. "Inherited more Dane traits than Stark traits, I see, my lady," said Sir Jaime with a grin to rival Sir Oswell. "And this is my son, Egon," said Aunt Elia. The knights all turned simultaneously to Egon. And each of them eagerly shook hands with Egon. "My prince, you look every inch like Sir Duncan the Tall and your great-grandfather, Egon V," said Lord Commander Hightower. "My thanks, Lord Commander," said Egon shyly. Eliana decided to leave them as the knights of the Kingsguard all seemed eager to speak with Egon and get the chance to know him. Eliana was at least glad that there were those amongst the royal entourage whom were good men and kind to Egon and his family and didn't see him as most in the south saw him as another in the Targaryen line to be mad, such as Mad King Aerys and Rhaegar. Ashura 6. All seemed to have gone well, Ashura had thought as she looked from the window of Ned Solar and saw how the King's Landing entourage had started to get settled down in the first keep. "We just need to keep things calm until Ulrich and Jane are wed. And pray that Robert doesn't do anything fucking stupid in tonight's feast. If he dares to try and harm Elia, Daenerys, Rhaenys or Egon, I don't care what it will take, I will kill him." Ashura drank a cup of water and also spotted Elia and Egon talking with Arthur, Oswell, Sabaristan, Lord Commander Hightower and Sir Jaime. She could see how happy the knights looked when they spoke with Egon. Are they happy to see him become the man he is now? Or are they just glad that he is safe here? She turned around when she heard the door open. She beamed when she saw Ned. "Ned, how did it go?" she asked with worry as she put her arms around her husband. Fine, Ash. Though it went as we had thought," he replied. Ash released him from her grasp and they walked together to sit down. "Why does he want you for his hand? Why can he not choose his brother Stannis or even his good father, Tywin fucking Lannister? What did he say, my love?" she asked as she held on to both of his hands. "He started off by reminding me of how much time we spent together as boys by reminiscing about our adventures in the Eyrie with Jon, Kyle and Elbereth," he replied. "Trying to soften the blow you landed on him by talking of nostalgic memories, he must have planned that for the journey," Ashura thought. "And then after paying his respects to her, he didn't ask for me to be hand, he basically ordered it. And then he even offered to wed Eliana to Joffrey," said Ned. "What? I fucking think not. I will never ever wed my beautiful and sweet girl to him if what my friends in King's Landing say are true." Ashura had received reports from old friends in King's Landing about Crown Prince Joffrey. That he was a lazy and arrogant young man, whom took delight in harming others and defenseless animals, such as Prince Tommen's kittens, and would often beat his brother and sister for pleasure. "I will not marry our daughter to him unless I've even seen what sort of man he is, or if he is still a boy," said Ashura. I told him that, but he said to consider it and for us to speak more on the matter tomorrow," said Ned. "And what of Egon, Ned? Rhaenys, Daenerys, and Elia? What did he have to say about them?" she asked. "He said he wants to get a better look at them tonight at the feast. But I am concerned what he may do when he gets drunk," said Ned. "You mean he wasn't drunk this morning?" "He certainly looked it." Daenerys 4. Harold's defense of Daenerys had warmed her during the reception in Winterfell's courtyard. She had been nervous around him ever since the wedding. During the feast, he made her smile with his charming smile, his funny stories of the antics he got up to in the Eyrie as a boy. But when it came to the bedding, as soon as they arrived in his designated chambers, he looked at her as she lay on the bed. "My lady, I will not force you if you are not ready." "Does he truly mean that?" "My lord, forgive me, but I am not ready," she said. "There is nothing to forgive. I know that this is not what you had hoped for in a marriage, but I vow that I shall be good to you," he replied before he sat down on the armchair in the room and fell asleep on it. Daenerys felt guilty as she slept on the bed that night, when he had been so kind to her and had not laid an unwelcome hand on her. But with the Baratheons and Lannisters in Winterfell, she feared for her safety and that of her niece, her nephew and her good sister. And especially of House Stark, whom had cared for them since the day they had first come to Winterfell, exiled forever from their rightful place in King's Landing after Robert's rebellion. But now, she realized, now my duties are not just to House Stark, but to House Arryn. She remembered as she looked at her wedding ring on her finger and the necklace her good mother, Lysa, had gifted her, one of an Arryn falcon. Both mother and son had been good to her in the few days she had known since the wedding and now the visit of the usurpers whom stole King's Landing from House Targaryen. Daenerys dressed in a veil dress that had been a wedding gift from House Royce and she had her hair decorated in a veil style as she prepared to attend the feast, welcoming the Baratheons and Lannisters to Winterfell. Daenerys rubbed her fingers over her bracelet as she looked at Robert Baratheon, Cersei Lannister at the high table, seated with Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashera. She looked at her bracelet. "Give me strength and aid, mother, as I face them," she hoped before walking into the hall and walked to the table for the Arryns. She looked around and saw Arto seated with Rhaenys, Elia and Aegon. She glanced up at the king, hoping that he would rage at them drunkenly. She felt a hand on top of her hand. She looked up to see Harold put his hand there. "Are you okay?" he gently asked. "I'm just nervous," she replied before nodding in direction of Robert the usurper. "You have nothing to fear here, Daenerys. You are Lady Arryn now," he assured her. She smiled slightly at how protective he was being of her and how gentle he was with her. "Dany." He asked. "My friends call me Dany," she explained. He smiled at that. "Well, my friends call me Harry," he said. "Harry. I like it," she said. "As do I. Though my father's master-at-arms would often call me Harry the Ass," he commented. Daenerys giggled at this nickname. She stopped when she realized what she had just done. She had laughed, when in the presence of the men and women who wanted her and her family dead. "Can I be happy with him? With a man I've only known for a few days? He's been so kind and so gentle. And he won't let the Baratheons or Lannisters harm me." Daenerys' happiness was short-lived when a knight of the Kingsguard approached her. He was tall, white-haired with old age, his handsome face marred with elderly wrinkles and scars, but a kind smile adorned his face as he approached her. "My Lady Arryn, the king wishes to speak with you," he said, bowing his head to her. "My thanks, sir," she asked. "Sir Barristan, of House Selmy, my lady. I knew and had served your parents, grandparents and great-grandparents," he replied as he offered his hand. "Thank you, Sir Barristan," she replied as she accepted his hand and walked with him toward the high table. He looked down at her hand as he escorted her and his eyes lingered for a moment. "That is your mother's bracelet, my lady," he said. "It is, Sir Barristan." "Did you know her well?" she asked. "I knew her since she was a little girl, my lady. My only regret is that I could not have done anything for her when she suffered at the hands of your father," he replied with a sad grimace. Daenerys felt sad as she remembered the stories from Elia and from Aunt Ashera of how mother was humiliated, beaten and raped at the hands of her father. "What was she like, Sir Barristan?" she asked, eager to learn as much about her mother as she could. "Your mother was an incredible woman, my lady. Always had a beaming smile for her children and her grandchildren. Not a day went by when she didn't ask how they were or look as though seeing them was the highlight of her day. And never was there anyone, whether high or low-born, man, woman or child, whom didn't think of her as the greatest queen of our time." Daenerys smiled as she heard how he described mother. "When Harry, and I journey for the Eyrie, I shall strive to be like mother as Lady of the Eyrie. I hope to be like her when I go to the Eyrie," she said. "Your mother would be proud of you, my lady, and would love you for being good to your family and to your people," he said. She stood before the high table, under the hateful glare of Robert the Usurper and his beautiful viper of a queen, Cersei Lannister. She was soon joined by her niece and her nephew. All three stood tall and defiant of them, she noticed. Elia was right. We are dragons, and we shall not be intimidated by these stags and lions, she thought with pride. The last of the Targaryens. Well, it is truly the case now that your brother is dead, he taunted as he looked at Daenerys. What? Viserys is dead? Oh. You didn't know, he noticed, with a self-satisfied smirk. Yes, my brother, Algerdus killed your brother in Pentos, after your brother drunkenly challenged him to a duel. And he accepted. When your brother swung a sword at him, my brother ducked and stabbed and killed him, with a fucking dinner fork, he bellowed before letting out a fully belly of laughter. You fucking drunk pig. He was my brother and he was a Targaryen. And you mock him, just as you mock the rest of my family. Whilst Daenerys felt her nails dig into her hands, she glanced at her side to see Sir Barristan look at her with sad sympathy. Your Grace, more mead is here, he said, pointing at a few servants, whom had brought a small keg of Carhold bronze. Ah. Good. I want a taste of some more of this Carhold bronze. It's a fucking delight, he boomed. Daenerys looked around and noticed how it was only male servants whom were anywhere near the high table and all the maids were in the rest of Tha Hall and far away from the usurper. Does Uncle Eddard and Aunt Ashera do this to prevent any scandal from breaking out in Winterfell? A wise approach. This pig cannot keep his hands off of any food, drink or women. How could anyone be in love with such a man? She glanced at Cersei Lannister, only to see how she glared at her, Rhaenys and Aegon. Begone, you fucking lizards. Out of my sight, he bellowed. Daenerys quickly found her way back to her table. Thank you, Sir Barristan, she thought as she sat back down beside Harry and glanced at him as he stood guard between the Baratheon king and Lannister queen. Chapter 19, A Broken Heart. Chapter text. Aegon 6. Aegon grumbled as he sat back down at his chair, in between Ulrich and Theon. Where's Bran? Aegon asked Ulrich. Theon pointed at Bran speaking to his uncle Arthur and to Sir Oswell went. Does he still dream about joining the Kingsguard? Aegon wondered. Can you imagine him as Lord of Anywhere in the north? He would hate it, Ulrich pointed out. So, Ulrich, just how excited are you to be marrying Jane? Theon asked with a teasing grin. Ulrich smiled, which only increased when he saw Jane chatting with Serena and Lyanna. When she caught sight of her betrothed, she raised her cup to him with a blushing smile. She's a lovely girl. Though she won't be lady of some fancy southern house as she may have dreamed of when she was a little girl, Ulrich said. Don't think like that, Ulrich. She loves you and will be happy with you, and to be the first lady of Moat Cailin in thousands of years and to start House Kelstark with you, Aegon reassured him with a pat on his back. Thanks, Aegon, Ulrich replied with a smile before a maid came to their table with a jug of ale. Ah, Clara. Save a cup for yourself later, won't you? Theon asked with a lustful grin at the maid. Perhaps, milord, she replied with a grin of her own before turning around and flashing one last grin at him before returning to her duties. Well, Theon, I think you've met a match in her, said Aegon whilst Ulrich laughed at her cheek and audacity. My cock will have plenty to say to the cheeks on her face and the cheeks on her ass soon enough, Theon replied, at which they laughed before drinking and being rejoined by Brandon. Ah, Brandon. What did Uncle Arthur tell you? Ulrich asked. They explained what it's like in King's Landing and at the Red Keep. Uncle Arthur is glad that I want to train for the Kingsguard, but says that he would like to see me fight in the yard first, tomorrow, he replied. I'd like to see you fight against the Great Sword of the Morning with your axe, Theon commented. Even better, why not batter the pampered little prince over there with your axe? Ulrich said, nodding towards Prince Joffrey. Prince Joffrey was looking at all around him with disdain, but what made Aegon's blood boil was when his eyes rested on Lyanna. If you dare to hurt her in any way, I'll emasculate you and send your cock and balls to your mother. Aegon was angry when he went to sleep that night in his chambers. He was angry at the Baratheons and the Lannisters and how they looked upon his sister and his aunt with disdain, when none of them had ever done anything to harm them. He despised Robert Baratheon for how he belittled and humiliated them in front of House Stark. And he hated how he gloated about the killing of Uncle Viserys to Aunt Daenerys. But what he hated the most was how Joffrey Baratheon looked at Lyanna. When he woke up the next day, he ate his breakfast as he normally would in the morning, whilst watching how Artos and Rhaenys cared for little Ricard. He noticed how Sir Alisa and Sir Jeremy had become even more protective of Aunt Daenerys and Rhaenys respectively ever since the unwelcome arrival of the Southerners. Aegon walked onto the training yard and saw Brandon sparring with Arthur Dayne, whilst being observed by Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Barristan Selmy and Sir Oswell Whent. Arthur Dayne's skill with his sword, Dawn, was incredible, Aegon observed as he watched with admiration. But Brandon's skill with his axe was very good, he could tell, as his famous uncle was not finding it absolutely easy against him. But of course, Sir Arthur had defeated him when he had disarmed him of his axe and shoulder-butted him to the ground. He pulled him back up and laughed as he did so and patted his nephew on the back. "You fight very well, Brandon. Most men your age or older last much shorter than you," said Arthur. "Thank you, uncle," said Brandon. "Indeed, Lord Brandon. Your skill is indeed very good. But there is more to being a knight of the King's Guard than simply skill. There is honor, duty and obeying your king's commands at all times," said the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. "Of course, Lord Commander," said Brandon with a nod. "Sir Drold, you cannot think to bring a savage northerner into the King's Guard. He doesn't deserve to be in it," said a smarmy and pathetic voice from the back. Aegon snarled as he looked at Joffrey Baratheon watching at the scene with disdain and accompanied by his uncle Jaime Lannister and his own sworn sword, Sandor Clegane. "My prince, he has shown great dedication and skill and has lasted longer against him than most men his age or older," said the White Bull with remarkable discipline in not snapping at the son of his king. Brandon didn't look impressed when he saw the future king step onto the training grounds. What gives him the right to think whom should be in the King's Guard or not? And he's fucking puny and does not look like a knight, or even a warrior at all. Aegon rolled his eyes at the thought of him as the king. "You lizard. Come and fight me." "What?" Aegon looked across at Joffrey as he drew his sword from its scabbard and pointed at Aegon. "My prince, we are here as guests of Lord Stark, it wouldn't do to harm his ward," Sir Oswell said quickly. Before any of the other King's Guard could agree to it, he snapped. "I am the Crown Prince. You will fight me, Aegon Targaryen," he shouted. Aegon decided to not draw Blackfyr, so instead, he drew Dark Sister. He swung it around a couple of times to get a feel for it as he stood across from Joffrey as he walked onto the training yard. Joffrey sneered as he pointed his sword at him. "Father told me the story of how he killed your father at the Trident and how he cried and begged for mercy. You will do the same soon," he said with a gleeful smile. "Then get on with it," Aegon replied, not taking him seriously as he raised a brow. Joffrey looked angry that he wasn't afraid of him. "What's wrong? Did you really think that I would be afraid of you? You must be as fucking stupid as Father and House Blackfyr if you think I'm afraid of you." Joffrey sliced his sword at him. Aegon parried it with Dark Sister and then forced aside the sword before cutting down onto it, breaking his sword in pieces. Joffrey stared in shock at what remained of his sword whilst Aegon sheathed Dark Sister. "Very impressive, my prince. We should do this again sometime," Aegon said with a chuckle. Joffrey threw the handle at him in a fury. Aegon dodged out of its way. "Impressive" was all Aegon said before he turned around, noticing that Queen Cersei was glaring at him. "You dare strike at your prince," she shouted. "Your Grace, the Crown Prince is not harmed. It is only his sword which has been broken," said Sir Arthur. And it was then Sir Jaime intervened, walking toward his nephew. "Are you hurt, my prince?" he asked sternly. "Yes. Look, uncle. My wrist," he moaned like a spoiled southern boy. Aegon was half expecting him to start stomping his feet. That's from overuse of your sword hand, which wasn't much from what I saw," he replied with both his brows raised. "Arrest him. He must be made an example of." Cersei Lannister all but screamed. "Your Grace, the prince has not been harmed," Jaime Lannister insisted as he walked toward his sister, dragging his nephew with him. "It'd be best if you left, my prince, before this takes a dark turn," whispered Sir Barristan. Aegon did as he was advised, leaving for his chambers. Cersei Lannister and Joffrey both glared at him whilst he left. "Fucking stupid idiots. Is this seriously how they want me to be removed as a threat to Joffrey's claim? And I thought that all southern lords, ladies and royals knew how to play the Game of Thrones. Clearly fucking not. Aegon found himself walking past Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera Solar when he heard them speaking, with Robert the Usurper. When the voice of the usurper was heard by Aegon, he stopped where he was, rooted on the spot, before creeping to the wall and walking alongside it until he reached the archway of the door. I cannot believe this, Ned. You would refuse to be Hand of the King. We were meant to rule together. I come to heal relations between us, and you do this to me. You do this to me. When was the last time you did anything for him after all the insults you directed to he and to Aunt Ashera? Robert, my place is here, with my wife, my children and my people. I am of the north. I will not go to that place where so many of my family have suffered, said Uncle Ned. Ned, that was the fucking dragon spawn, not me nor mine, insisted Robert the Usurper. Perhaps not, but that was certainly what would have become of Elia, her children and Daenerys, isn't it? Asked Aunt Ashera. I never gave those orders. Even if they were children, they are adults now, dragons at that, he snapped. Aegon, Rhaenys and Daenerys are my wards, Robert. I have raised them as if they were my own since the day they first came to Winterfell. I will never ever let any harm come to them. Not from you, not from your queen, not from your good father, not from your children and not from any of your blood. Not from anyone, replied Uncle Ned. Robert, I will be your hand, but only for a year. I cannot, in good conscience, leave the north in the hands of Artos and Rhaenys when they have never ruled in my absence before, said Uncle Ned. You would have me appoint Tywine, is that it, just like my viper of a queen wants, demanded the portly and slothful drunk whom called himself a king. It is your choice whom to name as Hand, your grace. You came to Winterfell to name my husband as Hand, not merely to heal relations between us, or to organize a marriage between our houses, said Aunt Ashera. He wants to name Uncle Ned as his Hand. Why? Does he want to use this as a chance to send killers after me, Rhaenys, Mother and Aunt Daenerys? No, he may have been a great warrior once, but he's not a player of the game. Wait, marriage. Whom does he want to arrange a marriage between? The Baratheon king grumbled at the compromise offered by Aegon's foster parents. Fine, but will you at least consider my offer of a marriage between my Joffrey for your Lyanna, he asked. Lyanna? No. Your Grace, we promised our children that they could choose whom they would wed out of love. We shall bring Lyanna and some of our children down south with us, but only if Lyanna consents to the match, will we consider it, said Aunt Ashera. Aegon rarely cried, for he rarely ever showed emotion. But just hearing the words of Joffrey and Lyanna were to court, made him sick to his stomach and he felt his eyes moisten as his hands curled into fists. Whilst Robert the Usurper agreed to this, Uncle Ned made himself heard. But, Robert, I will make this absolutely clear. If any harm comes to Elia, to Aegon, to Daenerys or to Rhaenys, we will leave King's Landing for good and never return, said Uncle Ned. Ned, they're dragon spawn. Gods knows only what they plot behind your back, he tried to say. Robert, I trust them. I love them as my own. Rhaenys is married to my eldest son and is the mother to my grandson. Daenerys is wed to the only son of Jon Arryn. And Aegon fought for the north many times beyond the wall. All three have had the chance to plot against me and act against me. They had many chances to escape whenever we traveled the north. I love them as my own, Robert, and I will never let any harm come to them, said Uncle Ned. At last, the usurping Baratheon king accepted Uncle Ned and Aunt Ashera. Whilst Aegon was glad that his foster parents had guaranteed the safety of he, Mother, Rhaenys and Aunt Daenerys, he was still upset. Aegon was upset that they were going to take Lyanna and some of their other children with them to King's Landing. But he was frightened for her when he thought of her being forced to wed that despicable, spoiled little shit. If he dares to hurt her, I will break every bone in his body, Aegon thought as he cried, resting on his bed. Interlude V, I Am Dragon, Us trailer. Jane Poole, Maria Poziva. Jane. Jane. Are you ready? Mother called from behind her chamber doors. Yes, Mother. Jane excitedly replied before Mother opened her chamber door. Mother and Father entered Jane's chambers, just as Serena, Lyanna, Beth, Rhaenys and Daenerys had finished making the final touches to Jane's dress. Jane looked at herself in the mirror and could feel her eyes moisten as she looked at her dress. It's such a beautiful dress. Gods, I just cannot wait to wed Ulrich. I love him so much, I just want to sing it from the top of the great keep for all of Winterfell to hear me, she thought as Serena clasped her cloak of housepool onto her back. Take a deep breath, Jane. You look like you're about to faint, Daenerys said with a grin. No, I know, she replied before taking a deep breath and having a sip of water. Rhaenys, did you feel this way in your wedding to Artos? She asked. What? Giddy. Unable to think straight. Feeling as though you wanted to sing how happy you are from the highest towers of the Great Keep, she asked. I said Jane without hesitation. Yes, I did. And I still feel like it when I am with him, she admitted. You'll have a happy marriage, Jane. Ulrich is a very good man and will always love you, said Beth. Yes, I know, Jane thought as she thought of all of the times she dreamt about marrying Ulrich, when she saw how muscular he looked when he fought with his brothers on the training grounds and how handsome he grew up to be. And then, when she had turned 5 and 10, he had kissed her after they had danced together in the Great Keep, the last time they had seen each other before Ulrich left for the war with Lord Stark, his brothers, Theon and Aegon. She had written many letters to him and he sent letters to her, not as many as she had sent, but he did send gifts such as necklaces made of bronze or wooden carvings. And it was only in Artos and Rhaenys' wedding that Ulrich had asked mother and father for permission to marry Jane, and they accepted. When he proposed, she had felt as though the world had stopped moving, as though she couldn't breathe before she hugged him and kissed him many times all over his face. And how is my beautiful daughter? Jane could hear father ask. Father walked into her chambers and beamed when Jane turned around to face him. Oh, gods, Jane, you are a vision, he said proudly. Thank you, Father, Jane replied before blushing. Father kissed mother on the lips before hugging and kissing Jane on the head. Gods, we'll miss you here, mother said as she hugged her. You can always come to Moat Cailin and see Ulrich and I, Jane insisted. Oh, we know. But your old parents will always miss their beautiful daughter, who's grown up so fast and is getting married today, replied father. Old? Come now, Veon, you don't look a day older than 32, Lyanna said sweetly. My lady, you are too sweet to say so, said father. Father looked outside and nodded. They are heading for the Godswood. We must get going, said father. Lyanna, Serena, Daenerys, Rhaenys and Beth left, accompanied by Sir Jeremy and Sir Alisa, whilst Jane walked with mother and father, whom held the hands of both his wife and his daughter. As they walked together for the Godswood, Jane was glad that she saw very few of the visiting Lannisters and Baratheons. The king's good brother, Tyrion Lannister, and the king himself were both in attendance. She and her friends suspected that the king attended to try and maintain good relations between he and Lord Stark, the man whom had now been announced to be Hand of the King. As for Tyrion Lannister, Rhaenys had asked him personally and he replied, I've always wanted to see a wedding of the old gods. Jane took deep breaths as she walked down the path from the Great Keep and towards the Heart Tree. She beamed when she saw Ulrich standing before the Heart Tree and with Lord and Lady Stark standing beside him, and Frostclaw sat by his master's side and looking up affectionately at Ulrich. Gods, I've dreamt of this day for years and years. And now it's finally here. Jane was glad that she was holding on to father's hand, for she feared that she may have been jumping up and down with excitement. It was as they passed the first line of Starks and Pools that Lord Stark's voice was heard. Who comes before the old gods this day? He asked with a powerful and thundering voice. Jane of House Poole comes to be wed. A woman grown, true-born and noble. She seeks the blessings of the old gods. Who comes to claim her? Asked father. Ulrich of House Kelstark. Who gives her? Said Ulrich. Veon of House Poole. Her father. Jane Poole, do you take this man? Asked Lord Stark. I take this man, said Jane as she reached for Ulrich's hands. Ulrich held her hands with his strong hands. Jane blushed and smiled as her eyes met with Ulrich's beautiful violet eyes. Gods, why are those eyes so beautiful? She wondered as she felt lost looking in his eyes. You may cloak the bride under your protection, said Lord Stark. Ulrich unfastened her pool cloak and passed it to Lyanna, whom smiled at Jane and winked at her as she took the cloak. Ulrich unfastened his own cloak, newly made with the sigil of House Kelstark, which was of a charging reindeer on a light green background. He wrapped the cloak around Jane and teased her by leaning in so close to her, but not to kiss her. "Don't tease me like that," she thought as he cheekily grinned at her. "I am hers and she is mine. I am his and he is mine." And this time, Ulrich leant in, intent on kissing her, she knew. "I love you, Jane," he whispered before kissing her. "Gods, I love kissing him," she thought as her tongue fought his tongue and her hand took hold of him on his back. "And I love you, Ulrich," she replied as they broke from the kiss. Jane felt overwhelmed with happiness as she walked down the aisle, holding Ulrich's hand as they did so. Friends and family of both Jane and Ulrich, as well as guests, all clapped for them. Some guests are more welcome than others, Jane thought when she laid eyes on the fat pig of a king, whom was leering at all women around him, including her. "Don't worry about that fat pig, Jane. Today is all about you and Ulrich," she reassured herself as she and Ulrich led the procession inside the great keep for the feast. Chapter 20, The Horde Approaches. Chapter Text. Eliana 4. The last few days in Winterfell were eventful. The night of Jane's wedding, a Catspaw rogue was found with his throat stabbed, in the upper corridors of the Great Keep, though none could find out whom he was nor how he got inside without detection. For the day after Jane's wedding to Ulrich, Serena was married to Brandon Dustin, and the day after that, Deanna was married to Domeric Bolton. Eliana was upset when father had told her that she would be courting Prince Joffrey in King's Landing. But then both he and mother told her, "We must make this clear, Eli, you are courting, but you are not betrothed to him. This is merely to see if he is a worthy match for you. If he in any way shows any sign of cruelty or harm toward you, then we will call off the courtship instantly. Do you understand?" I understand," Eliana replied. "At least I can see for myself what he is like. I have no intention of being married to a cruel prick who thinks he is better than everyone, especially Aegon," she thought as she remembered the story of how Aegon had easily crushed Joffrey's sword to pieces on the training grounds. Eliana was upset that she wasn't to be accompanied by her best friend from childhood, Jane, nor Serena, whom she was closest to amongst her sisters. Eliana, Brandon and Arya were accompanying mother and father south for King's Landing along with most of the household of Winterfell. But above all, Eliana was uncertain, for she had heard the stories of King's Landing from mother, Aunt Elia, Sir Alisa and Sir Jeremy. Of how in court in the Red Keep, all were self-serving courtiers eager to do anything for coin and power in what was called, the Game of Thrones. Father is too honorable to ever be a willing player of the game, Eliana thought as she saw father ride alongside Brandon and then the king joined them. When they stopped on Daeary lands on the journey to King's Landing, Eliana decided to wander around the lands alongside Arya and their direwolves, Lady and Nymarie respectively. "What do you think it'll be like in the capital, Arya?" Eliana asked. "Boring. I want the chance to do some fighting down there, not be stuck to do ladylike things," Arya replied. "Deanna is married to Domeric Bolton and she will one day be Lady of the Dread Fort," Eliana pointed out, knowing that whilst Deanna was a hardened warrior, she still tolerated ladylike things, as Arya referred to them, whilst Arya openly despised them. "I don't know why Deanna did that." "She didn't have to," grumbled Arya, whom missed her sister whom she looked up to. "Because she is a Stark and she follows her duty as a Stark," Eliana explained. "She didn't have to. She was free when she was a warrior, and now she is stuck being lady," she replied. "There's more to being a lady than dressing for feasts, sewing and having tea parties," Eliana replied. "Like what?" Arya asked incredulously. "Learning about the world and one's own subjects. Meeting your own people. Seeing how they live and doing what you can to help when and where you can. And it is a good way to learn about life outside the walls," Eliana replied, relying on her experiences of touring around Winterfell with mother and Aunt Elia and meeting with the people of Winterfell and the Winter City. They were interrupted when Eliana spotted a knight of the Kingsguard approach them. Eliana recognized him as Sir Oswyl Went. "My Lady Eliana, Her Grace, the Queen requests your presence at once," he said with a bow of his head. "Of course, Sir Oswyl." "Where is Her Grace?" she asked. "Having tea with Princess Myrcella and Prince Tommen at her wheelhouse, my lady," he replied before escorting her along. Eliana passed lady's lead to Arya, thinking that the Queen wouldn't like Lady, already as large as a dog, anywhere near her young children, whom Eliana suspected might be frightened of gentle and pretty Lady. Eliana walked alongside Sir Oswell next to a bank of the River Trident before they rejoined the royal procession heading back to King's Landing. She spotted the Queen easily enough. She was seated at a table just outside the main doors to the wheelhouse decorated with the banners and colours of House Lannister, painted red and with golden imagery of Lannister lions decorated all around the wheelhouse. Eliana raised a brow at the extravagance of the wheelhouse. What is the point of such extravagance for just a simple wheelhouse? The Queen was drinking tea with her youngest children, and Eliana was glad that Prince Joffrey was nowhere to be seen. Eliana was unsure that she could stomach him for how he had treated Aegon in Winterfell. "Your Grace," Eliana said with a curtsy, as taught to her by Mother and Aunt Elia. "Hello, my dear. Do come and sit," she offered, gesturing to the seat opposite her and next to Myrcella. "Thank you, Your Grace," said Eliana before smiling at Princess Myrcella. "Hello, Princess. That's a very pretty dress. Did you make it yourself?" Eliana asked, glancing at her dress, which was lavender-colored and with floral imagery on the front and on the back. "Yes, I did. I made it 3 moons ago," she said proudly with an adorable and innocent smile. "A beautiful face dress for a beautiful princess," said Eliana before she turned to Prince Tommen, whom was stroking a kitten on his lap. "My prince, he is adorable." "Does he have a name?" she asked. "Yes, my lady. He is Sir Pounce," he replied, blushing as he faced Eliana before looking down at Sir Pounce rather than face Eliana. "He's so sweet and innocent. I hope he never loses that innocence, especially when he is a prince in a place such as the Red Keep," Eliana thought before turning to the Queen. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but is the Crown Prince not here?" asked Eliana, feeling that this was the best question to ask. "Unfortunately not, my dear. He is hunting with his father and your father. I'm sure he will be back soon, and you can spend some time together," she replied with a smile, as though hopeful for her to be wed to her son. "I would like nothing more, my queen," said Eliana sweetly. Algerdus 8. "Uncle, we're nearing the outskirts. And there is a contingent of soldiers sent by Triarch Magai to escort us," said Mark, whom Algerdus had made commander of his scouts. "Very good, we'll march further and then we'll meet with the Triarch whilst the rest of us camp outside the city," Algerdus announced to his commanders, including Bronn, his nephews and Arodus. "Have you ever been in Volantis, Arodus?" curiously asked Edric. "Just once. It's nothing like any city you've ever seen, whether in Westeros or here in Essos. It is far hotter and far more humid than in somewhere such as King's Landing, Sunspear, Pentos or Tioche. Men have been known to drown in their own sweat in the great city. And there is a powerful stench of the shit of men, the shit of elephants, fish, piss and death," replied Arodus. "7 fucking hells, that sounds 10 times as worse as King's Landing." If he is not exaggerating, then I will never again complain of the stench and humidity of King's Landing. But when they rode to the hill overlooking the outskirts and the walls of the oldest and most powerful of the free cities, Algerdus stared in awe at the great and immense city. "Incredible," said Algerdus. "Have you ever seen anything like it?" Gendry wondered out loud. "Gods, that is a fucking stench." Torwin muttered. Algerdus sniffed the air and coughed and spluttered. "Fucking hells. And I thought that King's Landing stinks," said Tolaz. "Fuck, this stinks like a dead whore," added Robin. "The job that Triarch Magai better be worth all of this," Algerdus thought as he pondered what brought Storm Company to Volantis. A week after the Battle of Goyandroi, an emissary of Triarch Magai, Vogisu Hartonis, had come to their camp outside of Pentos and brought them news that Triarch Magai wanted to hire them for an ongoing conflict with the Dothraki. Algerdus turned to Arodus and gestured to the hill on which they stood, when he spotted a stream flowing beside it. "Camp the company here. And fortify the camp. If there is Dothraki here, I'd rather they faced a difficult target than an easy one," Algerdus ordered. "Yes, my lord," he replied. Algerdus rode alongside Bronn, Mark, Edric, Torwin, Tolaz, Tymond and Robin as they came to the main gate, and there was a small squadron of cavalry waiting for them, until an officer, wearing rich leather armor and drinking from a water skin as he rode toward them. Algerdus nodded to him as the officer halted his horse. "Lord Algerdus Baratheon?" he asked. "Yes," he replied. "I am Joranos Magai, my lord. I am your escort to my father, Triarch Magai," he said. "Very good, Magai. Lead the way," said Algerdus. They followed Joranos Magi as he led them through the bustling and overflowing streets of Volantis. And this is only the western part, Algirdas thought as he recognized one of the 9 wonders of the world made by men, the Long Bridge. Just lead my horse across whilst I close my eyes, Brother Edric whispered to Mark, which Algirdas overheard, knowing Edric's hatred for high places. Algirdas stared in amazement at the great black walls of old Volantis, 200 feet tall and wide enough for 6 4-horse chariots to ride across. Imagine trying to build something to replicate this in Westeros, Tymond commented as they reached the end of the bridge. You can open your eyes now, brother, said Mark. Edric opened his eyes and exhaled at seeing he was no longer about to step on the long bridge. You'll never find something like this in Westeros, my boy. That is no ordinary brick nor stone in those walls. They are made of fused black dragonstone, harder than steel or diamonds, said Algirdas. How is it that a great city such as this needs to hire a sellsword company as young as ours, uncle? How have they become so weak? Tolars wondered. Good point, Tolars. Very good point. Entering through the black walls, Algirdas was glad that conditions weren't as bad inside Old Volantis on the eastern parts as opposed to the western parts. Algirdas felt relieved when their escort pointed at a great and immense palace, thrice as large as the Red Keep. Here it is, Lord Baratheon. Home, he simply said. Slaves with ink markings on their faces took their horses and allowed them to dismount before they entered the palace, following after Joranos. The floors were made entirely of marble, with Valyrian GLYPHS engraved in gold across the floors and with gemstones decorated around each GLYPH. The columns were decorated with equal decoration, but instead of Valyrian GLYPHS, there was engravings of tigers, symbolizing the Magi family as the main family of the Tigers of Volantis. Algirdas looked around with wonder before he heard their escort's voice disappear as he entered a chamber. Father, they are here. Father. Triarch Magi. The Triarch. Be on your best behavior, Algirdas whispered to his companions. As they entered the chamber, a throne room twice the size of the Red Keep's throne room, Algirdas regarded the Triarch, sat on his throne, with over a dozen courtiers standing on each side of him, as well as numerous men dressed in armor. Your Excellency, before you stands Algirdas Stormborn of the House Baratheon and Lord of Summerhall, his companions, Bronn of the Blackwater, Tolars Waters, Tymond Hill, Tor Owen Pike, Edric Storm, Robin Waters and Mark Rivers. You stand before His Excellency, Malakwo Magi, Triarch of Volantis, the great tiger of the Magi and guardian of Old Valyria, announced a herald. Quite a lot of titles for a toothless and old fat man, Algirdas thought as he and his companions bowed before the Triarch. Rise, dear guests. Rise. You are most welcome to Volantis, said the Triarch. My thanks, Your Excellency. Your emissary, Hartonis, delivered the message with great urgency, so it was only right that we arrive with great urgency also, said Algirdas. And you have arrived just in time to help us in our eternal struggle against the Dothraki, said the Triarch of Volantis before he clapped his hands. At least 10 slaves appeared, bringing a table to the throne room, along with a giant map on the table. He climbed off of his marble and golden throne and was followed by the armored men at his side toward the table. Algirdas and Bronn walked to the table, which Algirdas was impressed with the attention to detail on the map. It was a map of Volantis and Volanten territories, and with the cities, towns and villages represented with figurines of wood, bronze and stone. An immense Dothraki horde of 75,000 riders ride for Volantis, led by a great and fearsome Khal, called Khal Drogo. Khal Drogo is a man whom has never lost a battle. And he is intent on crushing Volantis and annihilating our armies, sacking our villages and towns, in spite of the tribute the elephants have been paying the damned savages for years. Now, the people have rightfully entrusted the tigers with saving Volantis from the barbarians, said the Triarch whilst one of his military entourage placed figures on the map. What armies does Volantis have, Your Excellency? Asked Algirdas. 50,000 men. Including the mighty tiger cloaks of Volantis, numbering 5,000 men, proudly said the Triarch. And how many men does Storm Company bring? Asked a general. 3,000 men, my lord, said Algirdas. This is not good. Not fucking good at all. They are in the majority and they are commanded by a Dothraki warlord whom has never lost a battle against any enemy. We're going to have to be clever about this, and not fight fairly. Chapter 21, The Northern Wolf Comes South. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Robar 2. Robar was glad to be part of the Urin escort from the Uri to Winterfell and now returning to the Uri. He had felt it was better to be doing this as opposed to staying home in Runestone and training for the next tourney or waiting for news that a hill tribe was raiding villages on father's lands. He had already known Daenerys Targaryen from a few visits he, father, Ander, Waymar and Ysilla had made to Winterfell to meet father's boyhood friend, Lord Eddard Stark. He, Ander and Waymar would often go riding in the Wolfswood or train on the training grounds with Artos, Brandon, Ulrich and Deanna Stark, Theon Greyjoy and Aegon Targaryen, whilst Ysilla would spend time with Lyanna and Serena Stark and Daenerys and Rhaenys Targaryen. Indeed, after making landfall at Longbow Hall and beginning the journey to the Uri, when she saw him from the wheelhouse she shared with Lady Lysa, the now Lady Daenerys Arryn of the Uri smiled at seeing someone she recognized and nodded to him and greeted Sir Robar. "My Lady Arryn," said Robar with a nod. "Gods, she is such a beautiful woman. Even if she is the daughter of Aes the Mad, Harold is fortunate to be wed to such a woman. Ysilla will hate me for thinking that though," Robar realized as he remembered just how sad Ysilla was when she heard the news that Harold was to wed Daenerys Targaryen. But how will she cope in the Uri? It's a world away from the north and from Winterfell, and the lords and ladies of the Vale indulge in the Game of Thrones, more so than their northern counterparts, Robar thought as he remembered father's disdain of the game and was in approval of how the north despised the Game of Thrones, especially with Eddard Stark as Lord of Winterfell. Robar looked at the roads they travelled on, dirt roads half the size of the roads the Westerners of Westeros had built, for the Vale did not have good grounds to build larger roads. But that was until the Northerners had begun building Valyrian roads and had introduced the secrets of them to the Vale, the Riverlands and to Dorne. They had managed to widen these inner Vale roads by 10 feet and now labourers from the Vale, the north and from Essos were adding specially imported rock and oil from the lands of Always Summer to build the Valyrian roads. Harold halted the column when they reached a river populated with fish and had trees growing apples growing nearby. Robar decided to spar with Ander as the servants and squires set up the tents and pavilions. Whilst Ander was the better lancer, Robar was the better of the two with a sword. He would often request to be duelled by more than 3 men at once. It got to the point that father had to hire 5 master-at-arms to keep Robar satisfied as he had managed to outfight 4 men at once with his sword and shield. Robar slept well that night before waking up early the next morning. He looked at the tent which the 3 Arryns shared. He saw no sign of movement from inside, and noticed how there were 3 beds. It is good that Harold doesn't try and force Daenerys into his bed. In spite of her father and her brother, she is a good young woman and was always kind to all she knew and to the small folk of Winterfell, Robar remembered as he found his sheathed sword and tucked it into his belt. He looked around for his boots in the still dark early morning. He had found one boot and put it on, but he couldn't find the other boot. Where is it? Where the fuck is my fucking boot? Robar's squire, Galadon, was nowhere to be seen. Gods, am I going to have to survive until sunrise just to find my boot? Where the fuck is it? Robar decided to have one last look around his tent for his boot before he heard an ominous twig snap. What was that? I didn't see any men go out for more firewood or to hunt for breakfast. Robar slowly and quietly drew his sword, but decided against bringing his shield and looked around for the source of the noise. He looked at the nearby wood on the other side of the water, but he couldn't see any sign of life. Until he felt a sudden blast of air rush at him and heard a crack of wood to his right. He turned to see an arrow strike at the tree to his right. Fuck. Attack. We're under attack, he shouted at the top of his voice, just as 5 men came running towards him from the safety of the trees. Hill tribesmen. Of course it had to fucking be them. One swiped his axe at Robar. Robar defended himself with his sword before grabbing the axe head with his spare hand and then stabbing the tribesman through the mouth with his sword. Another ran at him with a bludgeon and a small shield covered in fur. He swung his bludgeon at Robar, before Robar dodged the blow and punched him hard in the neck with his free hand. As he gasped and spluttered for breath, Robar sliced at his throat and pried his shield from his fingers. He glanced around to see all knights and soldiers in the camp were rousing from their beds and taking up arms. Good. There was I thinking that I was the only one. Robar faced the 3rd Hill tribesman, whom charged at him with a sharpened stick, acting as a spear. He tried to impale Robar with it before he took a step back and then stomped his boot on the spear as it pierced into the wet soil on the ground. And then he stabbed him in the chest before he ran toward the fourth man, whom ran at him with a rusted and blunting sword. He tried to slice at Robar. Robar blocked it and maneuvered his sword and sliced at his belly. He coughed and spat out blood as he fell to his knees before Robar finished him off with a stab in the neck. He looked up to see the fifth man, swinging a large axe at him. Robar lifted his sword up, with the point pointing at the sky before he caught the axe in its hook. As he pulled the axeman toward him, Robar reached for his belt and unsheathed his dagger. He stabbed the tribesman in the throat. The tribesman coughed and spat out blood before he collapsed onto his back. Robar looked around for more to fight. He saw that 4 were running towards the Arin tent. He charged toward the 2 closest to him, picking up the axe of the first man as he did so. He threw the axe at the one furthest away from him, whom was just about to grab the tent's flap. The axe caught him in the back and he fell to the ground, just as Daenerys' sworn sword, Sir Alisa Thorne, swiftly cut down the other 2. The one closest to Robar turned around. Robar sliced at his chest before he could stab him with either his sword or his dagger. He fell to his knees before Robar stabbed him in the throat. Robar looked around once again and saw no more hill tribesmen were attacking. The other knights and the soldiers had fought them off. Robar panted as he saw the sun rise and he looked at Ander, whom had a sword wound on his shoulder. "Brother, what happened?" Robar asked. "Ah, don't worry. Just a slight cut. It's not as bad as it looks," Ander assured him before turning to him. As he faced Robar, Robar took a step back. Upon hearing mud squelching beneath his boot and bare foot, Ander looked down and noticed Robar's foot. What in the 7 hells? Where is your other boot?" he asked, noticing the blood on Robar's foot. "I couldn't find it in my tent, and when I got out of my tent, I heard rustling from the trees and went to investigate," Robar replied. "You mean to say that you killed half a dozen men, all with just 1 boot on, whilst the camp was under attack?" Ander asked incredulously. "Yes, I did," Robar admitted with a grin. "I fought off an ambush with only 1 boot on," Robar realized. Robar chuckled as he thought about this, whilst returning to his tent. And with the sunlight, he had at last discovered his other boot. It was underneath his bedroll. Willers too. Willers was sat with grandmother in her tea room overlooking the gardens, to discuss a letter that had come from one of grandmother's spies in King's Landing. "Father will be upset that all that wine he had sent to the capital was for nothing," Willers commented. "It was your father's foolish decision to send that wine." "It still amazes me that I gave birth to your idiot of a father," she remarked. "So, where does this leave our plans for House Tyrell?" asked Willers. "Ah, well, knowing the king's appetite for tourneys and grand feasts, he will undoubtedly have a tourney established to celebrate his boyhood friend's accession to becoming Hand of the King," said grandmother. "Giving us the chance to send Garland to the capital to find out what he can," Willers continued. "Precisely," agreed grandmother. "But why not Loras?" asked Willers. "You know your youngest brother. He will be more interested in jousting and spending time with his beloved Renly than furthering the interests of House Tyrell," replied grandmother. "With this sort of skullduggery, at least. But just by being such a legendary knight, he is furthering the interests of House Tyrell," Willers pointed out. "Only your father's interests in having a great knight as a son." "But Willers, I have lived long enough to know that there is a fine difference between knights whom joust exceptionally well in a tourney to a legendary knight famed for famous deeds," grandmother pointed out. "True, but should a conflict ever arise, Loras would undoubtedly make father's dreams come true of him becoming a legendary knight," said Willers. Knocking on the door interrupted their conversation from going any further. "What is it?" grandmother demanded. "Forgive me, my lady. Lord Tyrell and Lady Margaery asked to enter," replied one of grandmother's guards, "either left or right." "Let them in, whichever one you are," she replied before drinking her tea. Father and Margaery entered, Margaery beaming as she saw grandmother and Willers whilst holding father's hand. "Mother, Willers. I gather from Maester Lomis that there has been news from the capital," asked father, with an excited smile, as though it was a raven bringing the news that he had been dreaming of for years. "Yes, Mace. The king has named his friend, Eddard Stark, as Hand of the King, and has agreed to a betrothal between Crown Prince Joffrey and Lyanna Stark," said grandmother. Father flustered and grew almost red with anger as he let go of Margaery's hand. But why would he do this? When Stark has never shown any interest in the Seven Kingdoms since the end of the rebellion. Father wondered. Father, let's just think about this. The king is still a Baratheon of Storm's End. King's Landing is still a foreign place to him, and he chose Jon Arryn to be his hand because he was his tutor and foster father when he lost his parents. Now he wants his foster brother as his hand because he knows he can trust him to be honorable, said Willers. Before father could reply, grandmother held her hand up to silence him. Willers has the right of it, Mace. But your ambition to be hand of the king is not our main priority right now, said grandmother. Yes, of course, mother. Our priority is for Margaery to be queen, said father, his smile returning as he faced Margaery. Have your spies told us anything of Lyanna Stark, grandmother, asked Margaery. Not much, I'm afraid. They have not seen the lady in person, said grandmother. We need not worry. A savage northern girl is no competition for the Rose of Highgarden, father said proudly. I would take this more seriously if I were you, father. I doubt that she is known as the Star of the North for no reason. Especially when her mother is a renowned beauty such as Ashara Dane, Willers pointed out. Yes, which reminds me, said grandmother before she paused and turned to the door. Left. The door opened and there was one of her guards, presumably left, or right. Fetch Maester Lomis here at once, she ordered. Yes, my lady, said Left with a bow. Mother, Arik and Arik are your sworn swords and care for you. It wouldn't do to treat them as such, father said. Spare me your sympathies, Mace. I have no time for them when the future of House Tyrell is being discussed, said grandmother. Grandmother was just saying that because of the king's appetite for tourneys and feasts, he will most certainly host a grand tourney in King's Landing. This may make it an ideal time to send Garland to King's Landing and see what he can find out about Margaery's competition from Lyanna Stark, said Willers. Father nodded in understanding whilst Margaery turned to Willers. What do you think, brother? Do you think we should worry about the Starks? Asked Margaery. In terms of playing the game, I doubt it. Eddard Stark, by all accounts, is not a man interested in the Game of Thrones. He will undoubtedly want to return home as soon as possible. As for marrying his daughter to Prince Joffrey, I am surprised. Why? Asked father. Because, you know as well as any other, father, that Eddard Stark and the king have not been on good relations ever since the end of the rebellion. I don't think that has changed since, not when the last of the Targaryens are still alive and well and either in the north or in the Vale, said Willers. Even though a royal marriage may heal bad relations between their two houses, I am not certain it will, when the Starks have isolated the north from the rest of Westeros for nearly 2 decades. The door opened and Left gestured for Maester Lomis to enter. You summoned me, my lady, he asked. I did. I will need to write a letter for Garland. The time has come, it seems, to send him to the capital, replied grandmother. Notes. I had so much fun writing Robar's chapter, because I based that on a personal experience of mine when I was in the army. Chapter 22, The Horde is at our gates. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Interlude 6, Gavindria. Mark Rivers, Gavindria. Gods, there's fucking tens of thousands of them. Maybe even 100,000. Mark muttered as he laid eyes on the campsite of the Dothraki horde of Khal Drogo. Even with the intensity of the Volantene climate, he couldn't help but feel a bone-chilling cold as he saw how the camp seemed to stretch for miles. There's fucking too many of them. How can we face such a horde? Mark wiped the sweat on his brow with his handkerchief and drank thirstily from his water skin. He took deep breaths to control himself from panicking as he made sure to count the Dothraki banners and get an average number of how many they numbered. He crept away from his viewpoint and ran to his horse. What a way we've come, Triss, Mark whispered as he stroked the tawny mane of his horse and favorite companion since Uncle Algerdaz had taken him in from the twins at age 9. Mark had never liked it at the twins, where he was just another mouth to feed and one of many bastards of House Free there. And it was clear he wasn't liked by his cousins, uncles and grandparents, for he was a bastard of the king and there were some fools amongst his cousins and mother's branch of the family whom thought that he might be a threat to the succession should the king favor him. But everything changed when Uncle Algirdas took him away from there and brought him to Storm's End, where he met his paternal brothers and sisters. He was happier at Storm's End, where he had a better education than he had had at the Twins, and he enjoyed training with his brothers and with Uncle Algirdas. Triss was a name-a-day gift from Uncle Algirdas on his 10th name-a-day. Mark had shed tears of joy at being gifted this beautiful brown Dystria, still a foal, but was big for its age. He had named him Triss after Tristaifer Mudfor, the great river king whom defeated the Andal invaders in 99 battles. He had felt so happy that he had felt accepted and part of House Baratheon then, in spite of how Lady Catelyn showed her disdain for bastards in her household. And so, when Mark, his brothers and sisters had gone to Summerhall at Uncle Algirdas' invitation, they all accepted without hesitation, hoping to start a good life in Summerhall, in his household and far away from Lady Catelyn's hateful glare. Mark's dream was to be a knight and perhaps one day to be Castellan or Master-at-Arms for Summerhall. He reached the campsite of the Volantene army, of only 50,000 men, and with Storm Company's arrival, they now numbered 53,000. Damn those peace-loving elephants. Had they not been so content with paying fucking extortionate tributes to Khal Drogo and not spending that gold on fortifying the country and gathering the available troops for the army, then they would have more than enough men to take on Khal Drogo. Mark dismounted from his horse and reached the main tent where Uncle Algirdas was speaking with the Volantene generals. "Uncle, my lord," said Mark. "Mark, are you all right?" "What news do you bring?" asked Uncle Algirdas before hugging Mark. "The Dothraki camp is 10 miles from here," Uncle replied Mark before breaking from the hug. "And how many did they number?" asked a Volantene general. 80,000 Dothraki, my lord. There were so many of them, their campsite seemed to stretch out 4 miles, replied Mark. His words worried the generals as they looked at the map of the region of Selores. "Could we ambush them as they march on the city?" suggested a general. "Perhaps with a small force, but not an army of 53,000, my lord. And a man such as Khal Drogo will have left nothing to chance," said Uncle Algirdas before he looked at the map. "Mark, where on the map is their positions?" he asked. Mark looked at the map and pointed at a large steppe plain 10 miles north of Selores. Uncle Algirdas smirked as he looked at the map and traced his finger from the camp to the city. "To get to the city, they have to head through these plains here, near the ruins of Aquos Dene. There's a ridge there, with perfect grounds for a flank attack. If we control that ridge, we can rain arrows down on them and have the cataphracts of Volantis flank them," said Uncle Algirdas. Looking at the map and at the ridge, the generals considered and nodded at the idea. "Khal Drogo may plan for the same thing, Lord Baratheon," said a general. "Well then, my lord, we need to get a move on then. If we pack up the camp and march for the ridge now, we can get a head start on them before they can even leave their own camp," said Uncle Algirdas. "We'd never get close enough. The Dothraki are too fast and too mobile to keep any scouts and spies watching them," said another general. "No," said Uncle Algirdas before patting Mark on the back. Mark said their numbers were up to 80,000 horse riders. "A blind man could tell if 80,000 riders were marching and not lose track of them," said Uncle Algirdas. "He's right," Mark realized with a nod. They packed up the camp and marched for the plains of Aquos Dene. They had set up their camp a mile from the plains and by then, it had reached night time. Looking at the ridge from where he was riding Triss, Mark smiled as he nodded and looked at the ridge. "See what I mean?" Mark turned around to see Uncle Algirdas join him. "Yes, I do, Uncle. Not even the Dothraki will be ready for us," he replied. But then he saw torchlight in the distance. "Khal Drogo," he said. "Yes, and pray to the Seven that he doesn't have the same plan as us," said Uncle Algirdas. Mark slept fearfully that night. In spite of fighting in 2 great battles before this and having killed many men, he was afraid of facing such an enormous horde of the dreaded Dothraki, and especially a horde led by a fearsome warlord such as Khal Drogo, whom had earned a reputation as a great warrior and undefeated leader. Mark rode with his brothers to the front of Storm Company with Bronn until Uncle Algirdas joined them. "What's the plan, Uncle?" asked Robin. "The main Volantene army begin the march towards the center of the battlefield, just as the Dothraki expect them to do. But whilst they do that, we march for the ridge. We must get to it before the Dothraki can. Once we control it, the Volantene archers can rain arrows on them and draw thousands of them towards us. And as they charge at us, the Volan 10 Tiger Cloaks and Cataphracts can break their charge and begin to pincer and flank the entire horde, he explained. We'd better be fucking quick. Those fuckers will swamp us and this entire army if we aren't, said Bronn. We will, Bronn. Have no fear. Get ready to move out. When these generals finish giving their men their glorious and inspiring speeches, we will already be on the move, said Uncle Algirdas. Interlude 7, Cinque Walls returns to Once Upon a Time as Lancelot. Tolas Waters, Cinque Walls. Uncle Algirdas and Bronn led the fast ride toward the ridge. Tolas inhaled and exhaled as they reached the top of the ridge. We did it. We fucking did it. And Khal Drogo is none the wiser, Tolas thought as he looked down on the battlefield to see the Dothraki quickening their pace towards the Volan 10 army, whom marched at a steady pace. Edric, if you please, said Uncle Algirdas. Edric waved the banner of Storm Company high on the highest point of the ridge before piercing the flag onto the hill's soil. Tolas grinned as he watched as the Volan 10 archers began to march fast for the ridge, and with the reserve Tiger Cloaks and Cataphracts behind them. Set up a shield wall. Do not let those horse fuckers get here. Bronn commanded. Torwin and Robin led the infantry to the forefront of the top of the ridge, where they had a perfect view of the battlefield. And it was then, Tolas noticed, that the Dothraki had noticed that they were there. They've seen us, Uncle. Torwin shouted. All the better, Torwin. Archers, ready yourselves. Spears and shields, hold fast. Wait for my command. Get ready, lads. Out there are the most ferocious foe in the world. And like true men of the company, you will hold your ground and you will not let those horsefuckers get this ridge. You will hold and you will fight and you will kill. You will live to see another day to drink, fuck and live as rich as Lannisters, so long as you hold the fucking line. Uncle Algirdas shouted. Torwin and Robin led the cheers, shouts and jeers as a Dothraki force of at least 5,000 began riding toward them. Tolas climbed down from his horse and drew his sword and shield and joined the rest of the infantry, standing alongside Tymund as they waited for the first of the Dothraki to arrive. Those Volan 10 reinforcements better fucking come soon, muttered Tymund. They will, Tolas said with a nod as he lifted his shield up. A shrieking and terrifying sound of hooting and hollering from the approaching Dothraki could be heard as they halted their charge. What are they doing? Tolas wondered. They are trying to scare us away, so they can slaughter us as we run, said Tymund. Well, that ain't fucking happening, Mark commented. Infantry. Shields up. Up. Archers. Knock. Draw loose, shouted Uncle Algirdas. Tolas held his shield up whilst the archers loosed on the Dothraki, whose ride up the ridge was slowed from riding uphill when they stopped their screeching and realized that they wouldn't run. But any relief he might have felt at their slowed pace, was dispelled as he felt the Dothraki arrows pierce into his shield. The intense shower of Dothraki arrows seemed to continue as Tolas looked at his shield to see cracks appear from where arrows struck. Come on. Where are those fucking Volan 10s? Tymund shouted. Tolas peeked past his shield to see few Dothraki fall to their arrows. But then, a sudden shower of arrows from their left flank struck down hundreds of Dothraki riders and their horses. Tolas looked at his right to see the Volan 10s arrive and the archers shooting at the Dothraki. A general gave a command in Bastard Valyrian before he led the Cataphracts onto the Dothraki as they tried to regroup and aim at the approaching cavalry. Tolas raised his sword in cheers as the Cataphracts smashed down onto the Dothraki. Storm Company. Regroup. We attack. Uncle Algirdas shouted. Yes. We'll water these humid Volan 10 plains with their blood. Tolas ran for his horse and took his lance from the ground at the front feet of his horse. He climbed onto his horse and followed after Uncle Algirdas, Bronn and his brothers as they rode for the battlefield. The Tiger Cloaks were just joining the battle, as they and the Cataphracts were charging down onto the nearest Dothraki, flanking them and pushing them down, as both armies stretched across the entire plain. We charge for the enemy's center, Storm Company. Whatever they throw at you, you will fight and you will kill these scum, yelled Uncle Algirdas as he lifted his sword and axe up high for all to see. Tolas rode with they and the cavalry, closely followed behind by the infantry as they charged down the ridge and to the Dothraki's rear until they were a kilometer behind the enemy's center. Tolas looked at the center, to see 10 Dothraki banners, decorated with trophies of past victories as well as the skulls of fallen enemies on these banners. But the banner of a dark red horse was the highest of them all and was the centermost of the horde. That must be Khal Drogo's banner. I'll kill the bastard myself. That'll make a fine tale on the day I join the Kingsguard. To slay a Dothraki as fearsome as Khal Drogo, Tolaz thought ambitiously. Charge, roared Uncle Algerdus. Tolaz roared as he leveled his lance at the enemy and rode towards them. He grinned as he saw how the Dothraki were pushing and shoving amongst themselves to get to grips with the Volanthen armies. But now some were panicking as they saw how the Volanthen cataphracts and tiger cloaks were piercing straight through the flank of the Dothraki khalasars and soon to reach the center. But now, some realized that they were about to be swamped by an attack from the rear. Tor Owen yelled as he threw an axe at one, drawing an arrow from his quiver. The axe caught him in the chest and he fell from his horse and onto the ground. Tolaz spied a large man covered in blood as he raised a huge arrow, stained in the blood of Volanthens. He was muscular and tall, with a long and drooping moustache. His hair was long and braided, with braids even touching the underbelly of his horse. Rather than wearing armor, he wore dozens of scars and war paint on his copper-colored skin, showing that he was no easy opponent. The stallion he rode was dark red in color, reddened further by the blood shed by his rider. Khal Drogo, Tolaz realized as he spied his first target. He aimed his lance at a blood rider, whose scarred face was covered in blood as he raised his arrow to cut down onto Tolaz. Tolaz's lance impaled the blood rider and snapped in half as he was forced down from his horse. Tolaz drew his sword and cut down a blood rider as he tried to draw a dagger from his belt. He dodged the spear of a blood rider by leaning onto his back before slicing across, eviscerating him from one side of his chest to the other. He fell from his horse whilst Tolaz stabbed another Dothraki warrior. Tolaz drew a dagger and threw it at the head of one, aiming a bow at him. It struck him in the skull and the arrow fell from his grasp as he fell down from his horse. Tolaz cut down another before he stabbed one in the chest as he lifted an arrow up high to cut down on him. Tolaz took the spear from another blood rider as he tried to stab him with it. Instead, Tolaz slit his throat. Tolaz stabbed another with the spear before throwing it another. He blocked the blow of an arrow with his shield before slicing from the top of his shield and slicing the throat of the blood rider. He turned to see Khal Drogo, whom was glaring at Tolaz, whilst another of his men rode for Tolaz. He roared as he tried to slice at Tolaz. But he just stabbed him in the sternum. He drew his sword out of him, allowing the surprised Dothraki fall to the ground, head first. He turned toward Khal Drogo and pointed his sword at him. Khal Drogo pointed his arrow at him in reply. 4 more of his men readied themselves to fight him, until they were stopped by their Khal. Ich. Anna Yakadrive at Andal Anali. Back away. I will kill the Andal myself. Tolaz looked at his opponent. He knew from his time fighting that he might have an advantage over large enemies because of the heavy armor they would wear. But this man wore no such armor and he was hardened to wounds from swords and arrows from a lifetime of war. Khal Drogo sliced his huge arrow across at Tolaz's shield, whom blocked it and sliced his own sword at the fearsome Khal. The sword cut at his chest, but he ignored the blow. Tolaz cut at his chest, hoping to eviscerate him before he could deal a heavy blow onto him. Drogo blocked the blow and tried to force it back, but Tolaz replied with a cut to his arm. Drogo smashed his arrow onto his shield. Tolaz blocked the powerful blow with a bash from his shield, which made his hold on his red stallion unsteady before Tolaz smashed his shield across at Drogo's chest. The Khal fell from his horse, still holding his arrow. Tolaz climbed down from his horse to face the Khal as he stood back up, holding his arrow and spitting blood and hateful curses at Tolaz. His blows were heavy and powerful as he rained his arrow onto his shield. Tolaz blocked a blow with his shield and then sliced at his belly. Drogo replied with a powerful punch to Tolaz's face. Fuck, Tolaz thought as he felt blood dribble down his lips, chin and neck as he stood upright to face the Khal as he stood ready with his shield up and his sword pointed at the Khal. The Khal roared as he smashed his hardened fist at Tolaz's shield before he cut across the shield with his arrow and then sliced onto his arm. Tolaz screamed as he felt the arrow break across his chainmail and pierce his arm. He panted as he fell to the ground. Drogo sliced his arrow onto Tolaz. Oh no you don't, Tolaz thought as he somersaulted away from the blow, getting sand and blood onto his face and into his armor as he used his shield and sword to stand up again. Khal Drogo gently cut across at his shield and sword a few times before smashing down onto his shield powerfully. Tolaz dodged the next blow and then smashed his shield across at his elbow. The Khal screamed at the blow and then smashed his arrow down onto his shield. Tolaz felt the shield fall from his grip, and as he raised his arrow up again, Tolaz readied himself. He smashed his arrow down, only to be blocked by Tolaz's sword. Tolaz parried the arrow away, and then stabbed Drogo in the armpit. Drogo screamed as he fell to his knees whilst Tolaz stood above him and raised his sword up high and beheaded him. Notes: Battle of Aquos Dene is based on the Battle of the Catalonian Plains, between Flavius Aetius of the Western Roman Empire and King Theodoric of the Visigoths against Attila the Hun of the Hunnic Empire. Chapter 23, A Fight to the Death. Chapter text. Robar 3. My lord, the hill tribes have all united under this one man. They number an army of 8,000 men, said Jalwood Hunter. How could we have missed any of this, Lord Hunter? Asked Harold as he looked around the council of Vale nobles gathered in the high hall of the Eyrie. It had been 4 days ever since Harold, Lady Lysa and his lady wife, Daenerys, had arrived in the Eyrie, and now the nobility of the Vale was gathered to prepare for war with the hill tribes of the Vale, all united into a single army. It is just as father had said, Lady Waynwood spoke of, Robar thought as he remembered father's words to he and to Ander. Lady Daenerys Targaryen, now Lady Arryn, sat with her husband at the center of the high hall, with all seated lords and ladies of the Vale seated around them. My lord, for centuries, the hill tribes have been raiding villages, looting caravans, ravaging convoys and attacking travelers. I fear we have allowed ourselves to become accustomed to these sort of attacks, that we have underestimated them, said Lord Hunter. Many protested the words said by the Lord of Strongbow Hall. Are you calling us fools for looking down on primitive savages and barbarians, Jalwood? Demanded Drold Grafton. Careful with those words, Grafton. They are of the first men. The same cannot be said of you, whom are descended of the Andal invaders, snapped Uncle Nestor, Lord of the Bloody Gate. At his words, arguing and shouting could be heard from those of Andal heritage and First Men heritage. My lords. My lords. Robar looked at the new Lady Arryn. We accomplish nothing today if we are arguing amongst ourselves when we must be acting, for the sake of our peoples, whom will be the first to suffer should we not take the initiative. Robar smiled. He was impressed with her speech as the grumbling lords and ladies took their seats again, but kept quiet. Lady Lysa smiled with approval at her good daughter, and her sworn sword, the fearsome Sir Alisa Thorne, looked at her with pride as though he was a proud father. Lady Arryn speaks true. We must act, said Lionel Corbray. What do we know of the movements of this army? Asked father. Only that their numbers are less than 10,000 and grow with each day, said Houghton Redfort. But there is no way of finding out where they are, exclaimed Simond Templeton. Simond, an army of less than 10,000 cannot hide when a small force can, suggested Tobias Belmore. You would think that, Tobias, but no. They know the lands and the hills better than we do. They can attack somewhere and retreat in good order, said Royce Coldwater. No. Again, all eyes turned to Daenerys Arryn. My lady, asked Royce Coldwater. When Lord Stark was tracking the movements of wildling forces beyond the wall, he told us how he accomplished it, Lord Coldwater. By tracking where the most recent attacks had taken place, looking at them on a map and then isolating the area they are in, she explained. Impressive. That is good thinking on Lord Stark's part, Robar thought as the lords and ladies of the Vale agreed. Even hardened war veterans such as Father, Uncle Nestor, Houghton Redfort, Simond Templeton, Tobias Belmore and Brynden the Blackfish. My Lord Arryn, I will compile all raids and atrocities in the most recent weeks, said Anya Waynwood. My thanks, Lady Waynwood, said Harold. Less than a week later, they met up in the High Hall once more, whilst the Lords of the Vale ordered for their troops to muster at the Eyrie. In the High Hall, the lords and ladies looked over a map of the Eyrie, whilst Lady Waynwood had listed off the most recent atrocities committed by the hill tribes of the Vale. The most recent attacks have been in the centre of the borders between the lands of Houses Malcolm, Waynwood and Royce. 4 villages, 3 merchants' caravans and 7 groups of travellers and small folk, said Lady Waynwood. Whose lands have they favoured the most in these attacks, my lady? Asked Jasper Redfort, Houghton Redfort's eldest son and heir. Unfortunately, mine. 2 of those villages were on my lands, she replied with a saddened grimace. When was the most recent attack? Asked Lady Lysa. 2 days ago, my lady. A silk merchant and his caravan were attacked on the road from Old Anchor, replied Lady Waynwood. It's a trap. This Dorelf is doing this to lure us out and provoke us into an attack, said Cousin Albar. I doubt it, they are just attacking larger targets now that they have larger numbers, Sir Albar said Artis Hersey. No, Sir Albar is partially right. I think he is trying to provoke the local lords of those regions into gathering their armies, so that he can attack their armies before they can form. He is trying to pick us off, one by one, said Sir Brynden the Blackfish. How can you be so sure, Sir Brynden? Asked Harold. It's how I would do it, my lord, replied the Blackfish. Interlude. Best period drama on X. I own Gruffud in King Arthur, 2004 https://t.co/n/nqxdtz5bs/x. Jasper Red Fort, I own Gruffud. Jasper peered through his Mirish spyglass at the infantry that had left the town of Muleford, over 300 in number. They marched from Muleford and for Iron Oaks. Let's hope this works, brother, whispered Creighton. If Bronze Yohn's idea was correct, then we have nothing to worry about, Jasper whispered back to his younger brother. As he looked back, he spotted an unusual sight. A man dressed in tattered furs and sackcloth, and riding a mule whilst looking at the marching soldiers. He bore a grin on his face as he looked at them. There's our spy, Jasper said with a grin. Now, we just have to wait for him to make the next move, Jasper thought as he turned his mule around and began to ride away. Jasper placed his Mirish spyglass back into his horse's knapsack and turned his horse around. Back to Harold. Our prey has taken the bait, said Jasper. Though his father was an aging man and was married to his 4th wife, Jasper was at last glad of doing something other than learning at home in the Red Fort. He was proud to be heir to House Red Fort, but Jasper craved for glory and for the chance to make his name as a knight in battle rather than in tourneys, as Harold had done before he married the Targaryen girl and became Lord Arryn. In spite of being over 10 years their senior, it was seen as strange that Jasper was close friends with Harold Arryn, Ander, Robar and Albar Royce, Ben Coldwater and Terence Linderley. But in spite of the age difference, Jasper enjoyed his friendship with them, for he had no friends his own age amongst the nobility of the Vale as he was growing up. Jasper and Creighton found Harold speaking with Nestor Royce, Tobias Belmore, Royce Coldwater and Lionel Corbray in his tent, looking every inch the soldier and the leader, Jasper thought as he looked at his friend. My Lord Arryn, Jasper greeted, remembering how to address him. Sir Jasper. What news do you bring? He asked. They took the bait, my lord. The marching soldiers should arrive at Iron Oaks within 4 hours, said Jasper. Good. Then let's catch our prey. Prepare the men, my lords. We march and end this conflict once and for all, said Harold. He's been Lord of the Eyrie, Defender of the Vale and Warden of the East for less than 6 moons, and he is already actually defending the Vale from our old enemies, the descendants of the first men whom had refused to bend the knee to the Andal invaders many centuries ago, Jasper thought as he climbed back onto his horse as he, Creighton and John, their younger brother, led the Red Fort knights and soldiers to the battle. Harold had assembled a small army of 5,000 of the best knights and soldiers of the Vale to intercept the army of Dorelf, known as Dorelf the Endbringer, as he led the army of united hill tribes in the lands of Lady Anya Waynwood. The force from Muleford marching to Iron Oaks, led by Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, and Robar Royce, was to lure Dorelf out of hiding and attack, just before they reached Iron Oaks, where the rest of the army of the Vale was waiting, having been sailing to Iron Oaks beforehand, commanded by Bronze Yohn Royce. They rode quietly for the hills overlooking the outskirts of Iron Oaks, from where they had a clear view of the grounds, the walls, the castle itself and Lake Iron, which was connected to the narrow sea from a river. Jasper could see the battalion led by Sir Brynden the Blackfish and Robar Royce, but the enemy was nowhere to be seen. Where are they? Did they know we were coming? Where in the 7 hells are they? Jasper was furious. The enemy were angering him, by simply not taking the bait for their trap. Jasper turned to Harold. He could see the anger on his face. But he could see that it wasn't anger, not as a result of the enemies not being there. It was from the men whom were now his bannermen, and doubt gnawing away at him, with the fears that his rule would never be respected. Jasper's fears were confirmed when he saw how Harold looked around at his bannermen gathered there. But then a war horn blared. Jasper's head turned back to the outskirts, where he could see the battalion, just about to reach the gates of Iron Oaks. Arrows flew from the woods a mile from the castle gate, and from those same woods, marched hundreds of hill tribesmen. Form up. Shields and spears. Shields and spears. Get ready, lads, shouted the battle-hardened soldier, the legendary Blackfish. Ready yourselves, men. Harold shouted, his spirit no longer sapped with doubt and fear. His squire, Jasper's youngest brother Michael, passed Harold his lance, and Harold rode to the edge of the hill. Men of the Vale, the enemy at last show themselves. Long have they hidden in the shadows and stole, raped and murdered across the Vale for centuries. But no more. Not today. Never again. Harold shouted as he raised his lance up high. Never again. Jasper roared as he did the same with his own lance. Never again, was repeated all across the hill. 4th, Knights of the Vale. Michael took his war horn and blew hard on it. The sound reverberated all across the hills and plains below them, alerting the now thousands of hill tribesmen to their presence as they charged towards them. Jasper felt his heart racing as he rode towards the hill tribesmen, many of whom faced the oncoming army charging from the hill. Jasper could see a man in the front of the army, facing the gate, looking up at oncoming army. He wore battered chainmail and furs and wore a helm of a bear's head and wielded a great sword and a shield. Dorulf the Endbringer. Just a few hundred meters more. Jasper lowered his lance and pointed it towards the enemy, coming closer with every step his horse made and with every beat his heart made. It almost seemed as if his heart was beating in unison to the steps of his horse. The enemy fired arrows at them. Jasper held his shield up, feeling 2 arrows strike into his shield. But Jasper didn't care. He wanted blood, and he screamed for it as he could clearly see the face of the tribesman in the way of his lance. His face was covered with filth and war paint, and there was a large scar cut from the top of his left cheek and ending at the right side of his chin. Jasper felt the lance's handle rear up as it struck into the heart of the tribesman. He threw the handle away and drew his sword as his horse charged into the first line of the disorganized tribesmen. He smiled as he looked up to see the rest of the army marching through the gates and charging with the Bate battalion towards the fight. "It is to the end," shouted Dorulf the Endbringer. "Yes, it is," Jasper thought as he sliced his sword down, slitting the throat of a large man with an axe. He stabbed another as he tried to grab his leg with his bare hands. A third ran at his horse, trying to impale it with a spear. Jasper cut down the spear, chopping it in half and then stabbing him. But then he felt a force knock him down from his horse. Jasper looked to see a man had literally thrown himself up, just to knock him down. Jasper got to his knees and grabbed the man by his hair and stabbed him through the neck, his sword impaling through into his shoulder. Jasper withdrew his sword and turned to another, whom swung his axe wildly at him. Jasper ducked the first blow. He dodged the next. Then he grabbed the axe by its head and cut his sword down onto the shaft. The blow broke the axe in half. Then he stabbed him in the heart. Another came with a huge mallet. He swung at Jasper. Jasper held his shield up, right close to his helm. But the first blow smashed into his shield, dazing Jasper as the shield bashed into his helm. Jasper could feel a dent in his helm and warm blood swimming down his face as well as sweat. Jasper held his shield up for the next swing of the mallet. As it swung into his shield, the lower part this time, Jasper thrust his sword towards his belly. He felt blood pour onto his hand as his sword thrust all of the way through his belly until the crossguard of his sword was drenched in blood and touching the furs of his armor. He dropped the mallet, but then reached for Jasper's helm. He ripped it off and proceeded to punch and spit at Jasper's face until Jasper withdrew his sword and swung it with both hands at his head. His head wrenched free from the rest of his body and Jasper panted as he turned around to see another charging at him, this time armed with a huge black steel axe. He swung it at his battered shield. Jasper blocked it narrowly, but could feel a chunk of the shield torn away from where the axe struck it. Jasper dodged the next blow and then struck down onto him. He grunted when his sword cut onto his fur and chainmail and then swung again at Jasper. He chopped down onto his shield again. This time, the blow knocked Jasper's shield from his grasp. He sliced across, running at the axeman. The axeman blocked each blow skillfully and taking careful steps back as they fought. He blocked a fourth blow from Jasper's sword and swung his axe powerfully around. Jasper knew that if he tried to block the blow, he would be disarmed, for he was injured, wounded and exhausted. He was bleeding from his forehead, his lips, his nose and his chin. And his armor was weighing him down as he tried to fight this harder opponent. He dodged the blow and tried to use his sword to get caught by the axe's hook and drag him toward Jasper and then draw his dagger and stab him. He swung again at Jasper, roaring as he did so. Jasper caught the axe's hook with his sword and then reached for his dagger. He unsheathed it from its scabbard and thrust it toward the axeman. The axeman grabbed the dagger with a powerful hand. His brute strength stopped Jasper from stabbing at his heart, but he could see that the axeman was bleeding from gripping onto the dagger's blade. He grunted as he wrestled the dagger from Jasper's grip and threw it away before kicking Jasper. Jasper wrenched his sword free and sliced at his leg. Jasper fell to the ground from the kick whilst the axeman growled as he used his axe to hold himself up. Jasper stood himself up, panting and feeling blood pour down his face as he looked around. Hundreds of men on both sides were dead, even more were lying,